Good evening and welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for November 2nd, 2017. Hope everyone's recovering from Halloween on Tuesday. The first item on our agenda is a call to the audience for issue review session items and committee of the whole items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to address the City Council. If you'd like to speak on an item, could you please fill out a speaker's card, which is found in the back of the room, and hand it to our city clerk or assistant city clerk. That would be fantastic. I do have one card. I have a couple more. Ann Till, please come forward. State your name and place of residence for the record, and welcome.
Hi. My name is Ann Till, and I'm at 1935 East Meadow Drive. I'm a neighborhood chair for Alameda Meadows and an engineer at General Dynamics. And my comments are on the Innovation Fund. I looked through the 2 documents that were attached to the agenda, and I had a couple concerns about them, about the Innovation Fund and getting it. But anyways, I thought the wording was stringent enough that it might discourage some innovative ideas to be submitted. The triple bottom line seems difficult to live up to for someone like me who's a neighborhood area that might submit an idea for that. And someone like me may not have all the triple bottom line details and may not understand the council priorities, so, but maybe have a great idea. And then on the pilot projects, that seemed like a perfect thing for innovation funding, but the wording didn't really sound like a pilot project to me. I thought that a pilot project would be more likely to evaluate the feasibility, time, costs, and effects of doing a project on one location, to see if it might be implemented elsewhere or not. And in that case, it may not be something you want to implement later, but it would still be successful because you got to test it at that pilot location. And then there was looking for some flexibility in the definition of success. You might have really good reasons or results for reasons other than the original goal. And then sometimes environmental and social benefits are harder to measure. So maybe you have something that reduces feral cat population or cleans up the alleys, but those might be harder to measure. And then some ideas might take longer than expected to show results, and there was like a mention of a quarterly performance check. And then the other thing is sometimes innovations are sometimes risky, so there should be some allowance for failures. And then lastly, there was a green page that was attached, and it was called Innovation Fund Criterion Process. And it was really oriented toward city employees and not toward neighborhood. It really didn't address ideas and innovations submitted by residents that aren't employees. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next is David Rice. Please state your name and place of residence for the record. Welcome.
David Rice, 212 West Night Lane, Tempe. So I'm here to talk about neighborhood grants. So my 6-year-old wants a puppy, but I'm not so keen on getting one. It's not the money I'm going to spend up front, it's everything that comes afterward. And it seems like the same type of situation happens with neighborhood grants. And I think that's what you see with many HOAs that don't turn in many neighborhood grant applications, is though we get reimbursed for half the improvement cost, the HOA is on the hook for all the follow-up maintenance from then on. This is completely different from the neighborhood association grants, where the cost of ongoing maintenance is totally ignored, it seems like, in the grant approval process. And it seems like the assumption is that Don Bessler will somehow take care of it. So regarding planting trees with neighborhood grants, does the city even have sufficient resources to care for the trees we have in the ground now? Neighborhood grant funding for planting trees is just the start of a long commitment. And is the city ready to make that commitment when it's approving these grants? So these trees are being planted, but are they stealing tree maintenance resources from trees that are already there that might have more value than the ones that have been approved? Are the trees that are in the middle of a flat grassy field at Goodwin Park have the same value as trees on Mill Street, or trees shading the sports complex dog park? Regarding equity of the neighborhood grants, so Goodwin Park is putting in its third playground shade structure with this year's neighborhood grant. There's other parks that don't have any. Goodwin Park's 3 shade structures are going to be taking a share of limited maintenance resources that could be more equitably spent on other parks that don't have the same infrastructure. In general, I think the maintenance costs associated with these neighborhood grants needs to be quantified, and lack of a maintenance plan for these neighborhood grants needs to be a gating item, and right now it's not. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's write a note. Next. Well, you should have just stayed up here. Sorry, I didn't see that.
I won't talk about the other item. I'll just.
Okay. Next is Carl Parrish.
Hi, I'm Carl Parrish. I live at 101 West 5th Street, Tempe. I'm here today to talk about the Innovative Fund. One of the reasons that I'm very proud to be a citizen of Tempe is that we are a very innovative city. And I like to keep it that way. I like to live innovatively. There's amazing technologies and opportunities available soon. I also happen to be the owner of several different startups. And I know that as running a startup, one of the key critical things is the ability to be able to pivot based off of the feedback that we receive. And it seems that it would be really hard, the way it's currently worded, looks like, to be able to do pivots based off of that information to lead the innovation where feedback comes from. So I would like clarity on that. Also, it seems like there might be some extra hurdles, perhaps, in terms of measuring if it's been successful or not. A lot of times, consumer satisfaction or citizen satisfaction is kind of hard to quantify, which doesn't mean that we should not try to, but to limit the funding based off of that can often be problematic. So those are the things that I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Those are all the cards I have. Is anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council on any of the items listed on this agenda? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We're going to go ahead, if it's okay with the council, we're going to do the issue review session, but we're going to take it out of order. I'd rather have Ken present the long-range financial forecast, public safety, personal retirement system first, because we've got some other stuff that follows that kind of relates to some of the financial stuff.
Is this set to go, Greg? Greg, is this ready? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager, CFO. As we do every year about this time, we begin the budget process by getting a handle on what the resources might be over the long period of time, the long 5-year forecast that we have. And also that puts into context the budget decisions that you make for next year, how those will impact finances going forward. So this is the time of year that we do our initial forecast, and this is all really hard work that's done by Cecilia's budget team, Mark and Lori and Susanna, and they're in the audience watching to make sure I do this right. We also updated in February, so the last forecast you got was in February, so I'll draw some comparisons to what we told you in February versus what we think now. And then also the City Council requested that we at some point do a public safety personnel retirement system, PSPRS update, And that has an impact on our long-range forecast and our budget, as you know, so we combined them into one presentation tonight to avoid having an additional meeting just for that purpose in the future. So I'll get right to that. As you know, the council has 5 priorities, and this clearly falls under financial stability and vitality. This is important to know where we're going as a city financially. Some of the economic highlights, and by the way, you have a memo that has a lot more information than we're going to discuss tonight. So the economic highlights in your memo, they go in a little bit more detail, but suffice it to say that the economy as a whole is growing, and the city of Tempe is still outpacing both the state and regional economic growth that's going on currently. Our hotel motel taxes, I called those out only because they continue to grow. Not only are we adding hotels, but we're also, our vacancy rates are very low in those hotels, probably the best occupancy we've seen in a while. So we're doing really well there. We expect construction activity to stay strong, but it can't possibly stay at the level it has been for the last several years with the building of State Farm and all of those huge construction projects, but we do expect it to still stay strong. You have a detailed assumption page at the back of your memo that talks about, if you wanted to know what we assume the growth rates will be for the economy and tax rates and all of that detail is in there. We'll just cover some of the highlights tonight. One of the assumptions in the forecast that we need to be aware of is we're assuming that the expenditure limitation that we have, the permanent base that we have established by the state, will be increased by the voters in March. So that has to happen. So we've told you this before, and I know our voters are aware of this, but it doesn't involve an increase in taxes or anything else. It's just the ability to spend the increased revenue that the city has recognized and continues to recognize. So we assume that that will happen. We assume that there are no recessionary trends. We know that a cyclical economy, there will be recessionary trends. We don't project those in the forecast. Instead, we make sure we have fund balances sufficient to overcome minor recessionary trends, not the one we saw in 2007-08, but normal recessionary trends. And we continue to project moderate economic growth. Salary increases, market adjustments, benefit increases are included in the forecast at the rates that they're in our MOUs, our memoranda of understanding that we have with our employee group. So those are assumed as well. I'm going to highlight a few things in the general fund. Really small print. Slight increases in the projected revenue that we showed you in February. One of the things that you did this past year is to unrestrict some of those land sale and lease revenues that we get from 3 specific properties in the city. That has led to exactly what we told you it would, which is excess capacity in the general fund to promote some growth in that fund in the form of budget supplemental. So you'll see that that has strengthened the general fund. We continue to have strong fund balances, and we continue to say we're going to spend down that fund balance to between 20% and 30% over a long period of time, not in 1 year. Let's talk about a couple of specific things. The PSPRS, the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System, has offered something this year. They got emergency legislation approved in the last legislative session because some cities are really struggling to pay the increased contribution rates for the employers. So they got emergency legislation that says that unfunded liability that cities have, currently your contribution rates are based on an assumption that that unfunded liability will be paid off in 20 years. They've offered to extend that to 30 years. So if you wanted to extend that amortization period, that would obviously mean you contribute less. It would be like taking your 30-year home mortgage and saying you can pay it off in 40 years. Your house payment's going to go down, but you're going to pay more interest in the long run. But they've offered that to get some cities some relief immediately. So one strategy for that is to say, yeah, we definitely want to take that and solve our current budget problems that we might have by reducing our contribution to PSPRS. Another strategy is to say, no, let's leave it at 20 years. We're doing fine. Let's keep it that way. At least one city that I know said, let's adopt the 30-year, but pay as if it's a 20-year amortization. So we have that option in a bad year to say we want to pay the smaller amount. You can do that. The only negative I can think of that is that the bond rating agencies would say, that's an indication that Tempe must have a weak financial condition. Why would they extend to 30 years? For comparison purposes, ASRS is 15 years. So I'm not going to ask you this second, but I'm telling you what PSPRS is going to do, hopefully in December, is give us new numbers. They're going to say, this is what your minimum required contribution is for next year based on the current year 20-year amortization. This is what it would be if you extended it to 30 years. And this is how much more interest you will pay if you do that and actually pay on the 30-year schedule. They're going to do that for us. I will schedule another time to come back with you and say, now we have to pull the trigger. Now, the legislation said you could have made this decision before last July 1st to implement that immediately, and some cities did that. We didn't do that because we hadn't had a chance to talk with you all. We didn't need to do that because they said you can do this before March of any year leading up to that July start. But once you do it, there's no retracting it. So if by this March, if you decide you want to go to a 30-year, we can do that for next year.
And I don't know if the council, I would, I mean, if you want to, if it makes sense to do the 30-year, but we're still paying at a 20-year rate.
That's
Pay it off in
definitely a
20.
consideration. We can.
Would that look favorably or unfavorably
So
towards us?
think about that, because we're going to get to the PSPRS presentation here in a minute, so let some of that sink in, and then I'll ask you at the end if you have any immediate feedback. But what I would suggest is, let's wait until we see the numbers from PSPRS in March, or I mean in December, and make that decision before March.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, Colby?
I just want to make sure I understood you though, but it's not a one-time offer. In 7 years, we could switch from 20 to 30
No.
years, right?
Yes, if you haven't made a decision and you're still at 20
yeah, made a
years, you can
decision.
make that decision any March prior to that July.
We make
Make
it,
it,
we
you
never
can't go
make it
back.
back.
However, some cities have pointed out the legislation could change. Next year, they might say, that was a really bad idea, take that away. And they would probably grandfather the people who had already made the decision. So there's that. Okay, there's that. The last thing I want to mention to you is, specifically about the general fund that's kind of new, is ASTA, the Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority. When we renovated Diablo Stadium how many years ago, Andrew? About 16, yeah, that sounds about right. About 16 years ago, we renovated that. We spent about $20 million renovating Diablo Stadium. About 12 of that was going to be reimbursed from ASTA. The other 8 we just paid. But the 12 we also fronted. We issued bonds. We spent the whole 20 million with the understanding that once they got down past the other cities who had done it before us, eventually we're going to get repaid. Well, that day has come. And we expect and we project in the general fund that we will get about $13 million over the next 4 years. That could all change. This is based on rental cars, it's based on the economy, but we are now in line to get payments, and we strongly expect to get that $13 million within the next 4 years. So what I want to tell you about the general fund is, it's in the revenue. We show that as estimated revenue in there, but it's not in the fund balance because I'm coming before you tonight to say, you might want to hold off before you start budgeting the expenditures of that money, because we're right in the middle of a Diablo Stadium master plan process that's going to identify all the needs just to keep the stadium at its current condition. We also know that owners have a tendency to say, we'd like to keep this at Major League Baseball standards, and having a weight room in right field under a tent probably isn't Major League Baseball standards. We might want an actual weight room. So there are any number of things that might come out of that study. So what I would suggest is, our budget is healthy. You have plenty of room for growth next year. If we just restrict that and keep it out of next year's budget until such time that we see that master plan, you would then say, do we have another $20 million to spend on this? Do we have $10 million to spend? But this is your call. If you just want to put the $13 million in the budget and spend it, that's up to you. So I'm going to also ask you that question at the end. But I'm just telling you, when we look at the general fund, recognize that that $13 million is in revenues, but we have taken it out of the fund balance because we only show you unrestricted fund balance.
I do know, just to add something, because we're going to come back to this, but we do have a master plan in place, and it's going to be way more than the money that we're going to have coming in. So I just, based on discussions, so I think it's important as a council that we make sure that we don't touch that money, that it goes right back into the very revenue generating thing that, system that it's actually happening in. It just makes sense to put that money right back in there, so we, in the discussion, but we'll have the discussion towards the end.
Mayor, I just got a quick question, and you said you strongly believe we will receive those monies. At what point will we know for sure?
Well, we won't until we get it, because we know that there's this
We're in
water,
line.
Then we'll
there's
know.
this
Then we'll know.
waterfall effect. So first of
Right.
all, there were people who renovated their stadiums before us that were in line before us. We have now gotten to the point where we're the next one. But first they pay off the debt for Cardinal Stadium, and then they pay off other debt that they've issued. And then
Stadium.
and there has to be sufficient revenue every year to pay that before they dump it into ours. That waterfall effect has to happen. And We expect that to happen. If the economy stays the way it is, if nothing happens to that rental car revenue, we expect to get all of that money in the next 4 years.
But, thank you, Mayor. To that point, you don't know like date, I mean, month-wise when that happens?
No, they pay us,
When they
I
get it.
believe they pay us semi-annually, and on that semi-annual payment is when we know how much we're going to get. Yeah. So.
But in all likelihood, we'll get it, it's
But
just
it's a
gonna be
very
over time.
favorable projection right now that we will probably, as a matter of fact, we've received some, and we expect to continue to receive it, is what I'm saying. So
When's the completion of the master plan? I'm sorry.
I think the master plan is near completion. It's a matter of, I think the next step is, if we've gone out and, well, let me say this. I know we've gone out and examined the stadium and identified things that we think need to be done. Cracked concrete in the bowl, visitors, clubhouse. I know we've done that. Then the question becomes, what do we want to do about that? Do we want to fix those things and then talk about what needs to be done next? Or do we want to say, we also would like some seating in the outfield. We'd also like a weight room. We'd also like an upgrade. Do we want to do it all at once? So I think we have the data and the information related to what's currently deficient. What I don't know is we haven't settled on what the plan might be going forward. They're going to come to you for that. Public Works will come to you and facilities will come to you and ask you, what do you want to do?
Right.
There's
Do
a
you-
time to
Yeah, I mean, I
engage.
totally agree. I guess my thought though too is, I mean, just why we're having the conversation about the master plan, it would be good to have the discussion of priorities based on what we expect to receive.
Right.
And, you know, I think that might be to make the discussion a little bit easier moving forward, because I mean, I agree with the mayor. I think that money should go back into the stadium. But to maybe keep things a little bit more focused, it'd be good to maybe have those pieced off based on how those dollars will come back to the city.
Well, we're really lucky. We have a good relationship with the Angels ownership, and they are very conservative when it comes to spending money on that stadium. They've told us on several occasions, we aren't looking for the Taj Mahal here. We want it to support our needs. You don't need to keep up with the Joneses and Salt.
Keep up with yourself?
The Salt River fields, and we don't need lakes and waterfalls and things like that. So, I mean, we really have a good relationship with the Angels ownership.
I
So
agree.
I think it will be good. But
But it is definitely one of the oldest stadiums
yes,
in the state.
yes. So you're familiar with this general fund model. This is an interactive model that we use. This is just a snapshot of this model. This is what we showed you in February. We don't need to focus on all the numbers. For those who have never seen it, the chart on the left is revenues and expenditures. This shows our expenditures a little higher than our revenues because we're spending down our fund balance intentionally. The chart on the right shows our fund balance. The yellow cone is we target a 25% fund balance in the current year, but you only do that to the extent that you can project a fund balance between 20 and 30% throughout the 5-year forecast. So we are intentionally high because we built up our fund balance so that we could spend it down after the expiration of the temporary sales tax that was approved during the recession. So we're right where we want to be. Things are moving along well. This is what we showed you in February. And by the way, the numbers that are colored, the green, the red, the blue, those are optional numbers that can be changed. So we're talking about changing personnel costs and number of personnel and recurring and non-recurring supplemental budget and how much cash we use to pay our debt. So this is our current scenario. And again, this is not a recommendation. We're just plugging numbers here showing you that it will work and that we are stable throughout the 5-year forecast. So we've significantly increased the numbers based on a slight increase in sales tax revenues, unrestricting those restricted funds, and and the ASTA funding becoming available. So our revenues are better than we thought, and so we put numbers in here like $3 million recurring and non-recurring for supplemental budget requests next year. Those are pretty big numbers compared to what we had built in there in February. And those numbers, these are not suggestions, these are just scenarios that could work. And I guess the takeaway from this is the fund is still healthy, we have room to grow, and we have room to make decisions if we have some things in our budget that we want to focus on a little more closely. So it's good news here. And again, we're not trying to memorize numbers here, we're just showing you the flavor of the fund. We talked about the ASTA funding, personnel, we talked about what costs are assumed there. Any questions on the general fund and the condition? Okay, let's move to the other funds. We don't include models here in this presentation. They're all in your memo, but we're just going to touch on some of the high-level things. So the enterprise funds we know are the funds that are operated as businesses. So there are no outside funds coming in, and they don't support the general fund in any way. These are self-supporting funds. The water wastewater fund is forecast to be stable throughout the forecast, but it assumes that the 2017 rates are implemented as recommended, rate adjustments. Solid waste also assumes that these 2017 rate proposals are assumed, but if you look in your memo, you'll see that the solid waste fund doesn't look very healthy, and there's actually deficit spending in every year of the forecast, and Public Works is aware of this, and they are working on adjusting budgets so that the forecast accurately portrays a stable fund and it gets back to where they want it to be. So they're working on that. The Gulf Fund, stable going forward. Revenues continue to increase steadily. Their newest enterprise fund is our Emergency Medical Transportation Fund, which has now kicked off, as you know. We have 2 ambulances and 13 positions that are expected to be in service here in the first year. We anticipate that it will take about 5 or 6 years for this fund to recoup the costs that are spent initially to get it started, and then it will be break even or better after that. The special revenue funds, which are those funds that have a dedicated revenue fund, like our performing arts tax or our transit tax. So transit is stable. We've built in the streetcar and the orbit operational costs. We still have the $13 million gap for the construction of the streetcar that we assume partial coverage will be coming from landowners and partially from the city of Tempe as a landowner in that area. Transportation HERF, we have sufficient funds there that Public Works has increased the budget by about $5 million in the current year to spend on the HERF fund to get the streets up to snuff. So they've invested a lot more money in streets in the current year. We assume that the state will not have any additional sweeps. I know the governor had an announcement at a press conference the other day that said something that didn't make sense to me, that they were not going to sweep the HERF funds to fund DPS personnel anymore, and that $30 million wouldn't be swept, but they didn't talk about the other $100 million that will be continued to be swept to fund DPS. So I don't understand that press conference, but that's just me. Performing arts, we know that performing arts tax is set to expire in 2020, and at that time we will have $3.5 to $4 million deficit projected. But we also know we're going to the voters to ask to extend that tax. So that will be necessary in order for that fund to remain stable. Okay, let's go to public safety personnel system, the PSPRS. You've seen in your packet that this system, and you've read in the news that this system is struggling. But I just want to make a few comments that we make to our employees on a regular basis when we talk about PSPRS. And these are important things to acknowledge before we start talking about numbers. One, our employees understand that the men and the women that work in our public safety positions are not causing this fund to be unstable. They were hired to do a job, they're doing their job, they were promised benefits, including retirement benefits, and no actions on their part are causing this. Another important factor is that increases to our contributions to PSPRS are not jeopardizing the pay and benefits of non-sworn, because we have a policy now that says we are going to pay you based on the market a fair wage and benefit package. That's what we're doing. So if PSPRS contributions increase, we don't say to the other groups, your pay and benefits will decrease. Our employees understand that. It's important for us to state that publicly. There were recent legislative changes that were proposed to stabilize PSPRS, and our employee groups were behind those changes, even though they mean reduced benefits going forward for public safety employees. And not only our employees here in Tempe, but the public safety employee groups statewide supported those changes. That was an effort on their part. And lastly, I just want to say that we're committed to fully funding our obligation. There is no talk and no notion that somehow we would let this fund go belly up, or that people wouldn't receive the pension promises that they were guaranteed when they took a job at the city of Tempe. So all of those things are important to know. PSPRS and the Arizona League of Cities and Towns has encouraged us as financial professionals to come to you as elected officials and make sure you understand your roles in the PSPRS system, because it's different than the Arizona State Retirement System that non-sworn employees are part of. We should be regularly updating you on the fund conditions, plan changes, your roles and responsibilities, and the strategies that you might have to ensure financial prudence. So that's what we're doing. at its base, the system is pretty simple. PSPRS is different than ASRS in several ways. PSPRS, each employer has its own set of funds. We have a police fund and we have a fire fund. Our contributions go into that fund. Our employees are paid out of that fund when they retire. ASRS is different. It's a statewide fund where city employees, county employees, state employees, school teachers all pay into the same fund. All employers and all employees pay equal amounts, and everybody has the same retirement benefits. Okay? PSPRS, everybody has the same retirement benefits, but everybody doesn't pay the same amount. Employees pay different amounts than employers, and no employer pays the same amount. It's all based on your funds for your police and your fire. So our contribution for police isn't even the same as our contribution for fire. That's an important distinction to make. So in its basic form, the inflows are the contributions that come in from employees and employers, and the investment that's earned on those assets are used to pay the outflows, which are the benefits and the expenses of the fund. So when we get to, when we look at the fund and the conditions of the fund, it's a really simple formula to figure out why that is. Okay, so assets are pooled, we talked about that. I'm sorry, we didn't talk about it. Assets are pooled for investment purposes. So even though we have separate funds, they keep all the money in one pot and invest it. So everybody gets the same investment return on that. We don't invest it in different funds than other cities do. It's more representative than ASRS is of the true cost of the plan. This is a slide almost directly off the PSPRS and League of Cities slide that says these are the things you need to make sure your employer, your decision makers are aware of. And in this fund, the employer bears the risk, not all employers together in a pool. You bear the risk of your own funds. So this is our funded status. You can see that both, and these are not numbers that you can read on this slide, but in your packet you have a better chance of reading them. But both the police and fire, fire represented in red and police in blue, have reached a funding level of below 50%, which means half of the money is in the fund that's necessary to pay the benefits that were promised. You can see that there's a pretty consistent decline. And I put a note on the slide based on actuarial assumptions. These are all projections of their actuary, and they're based on assumptions of what interest will be earned, at what rate will pay and benefits increase for these over the years. So these are all system-wide assumptions. We assume what interest will be earned system-wide to apply to all these funds. We assume that every employee in the state will increase their rate of benefits and pay at the same rate. Those are not individual assumptions of employers. Those are system-wide assumptions. The bottom line of that is this is probably understated. They have overestimated interest earnings for years, and they have underestimated the rate at which pay and benefits increase for years. So those assumptions that are built into their actuarial study, as a matter of fact, when we do our bond ratings, Moody's will say, yeah, we know what you think your unfunded liability is. We've put some real numbers in there, and it's much worse. So all I'm telling you is this is just actuarial projections. These are not real numbers. This is not the exact funded status. It's just an estimate provided by their actuaries. The unfunded liability, of course, increases when your funded status goes down. So our unfunded liability has reached about $265 million total for police and fire. So the unfunded liability is the thing we're talking about, the 20-year amortization. Every year they calculate what do you have to put into the system to pay those liabilities that are currently due, and what do you have to pay into the system to fund the unfunded liability, assuming it will be to zero in 20 years. That's what the amortization schedule is.
Yes.
Can I ask just, this is going to sound like a really rudimentary question, and I apologize for that. I just want to make sure I understand it. So, for example, the bond for TCA, that was a 20-year bond, right?
Right.
And that was, what, like $40 million or something? I don't recall.
I think it was, I'll say it was close to that.
Okay, so we'll say that. So this is the equivalent of a $260 million bond to be paid over 20 years, or maybe 30 years now.
Right. Pardon me?
But the fund's not going to stay at 260 for a course of 20 years.
Well, the reason you see it climbing here is exactly what I told you. Last year, when they figured out what our unfunded liability was, it was based on interest assumptions, and it was based on increases in pay and benefits. And when those don't come to fruition, even though you're paying more, your unfunded liability increases because the assumptions are wrong, which is why, and this issue has been brought up, Years ago, when they said to the cities, you don't have to contribute anything. We're 100% funded. Just contribute zero. That was based on an interest rate assumption of about 9.5%. It was a horrible assumption. They should have reduced the interest rate assumption to 7% and say, chunk in 7% this year. Don't give us zero. This is based on bad assumptions. So that happened. So when you say it will go down as long as what we contribute is at least equal to or more than what is necessary to fund the unfunded liability. And what you see is they keep telling us what the 20-year amortization is, and we pay that amount, and they say, oh, it's worse than we thought. And the next year it goes up. That's what that chart represents.
But this is the part I wanted to make sure. So if I'm reading this right, 2016-17 at whatever that is, $260 million, that if I was trying to figure out what the monthly payment would be, it would be roughly 6 times what the TCA building is.
So we pay $25 million to PSPRS this year. That $25 million is covering your current liability and 1/20th of the amortization of that unfunded liability.
Does that include the additional increase that they gave us? The $5
That
million?
includes whatever increase they knew about last year. It does
Right,
not
right.
include.
We don't know
results.
until they tell us.
No. So recently, a case was decided by the Arizona Supreme Court. One of the changes that was made legislatively was to increase the employees' contribution, and they tried to impose that on existing employees to take it from 765, 865, 9 up to 1165 and remain there. And they tried to do that, and the court case was filed, and the court said you can't increase the contribution rate for those people who are already working because you had a contract with them. So we just had a $6 million bill that we had to pay to our current employees and some recent retirees to cover the amounts that they over-contributed to the system. So this fund, the current contribution that we're paying did not assume that. It also, although it assumed that the interest rate assumption would go down, I think from, I want to say 8 to 7.5, it assumes it's going down again next year, which will also be built in. So even though they haven't told us what our contribution rate will be next year, we know it's going to go up because we contributed $6 million less to the fund than we should have because they allowed us to pay that to our employees and not put it in the fund. We also know that the interest that they assumed wasn't close to what they earned. And the ongoing effect of reducing employees' contributions from 11.65 down to 7.65 means that the employers will pick up that slack. So we know it's going to go up, and it will probably go up significantly next year.
Robin?
Yes.
Jones, quick question. The money that we get back from the state, is it for home fire insurance or something? Does that automatically go towards paying this?
There's one offset, and I just switched to the next chart, and
Okay.
you can see it in the next chart. The contribution rates that the employees pay, the
there it is.
employers pay. The pink amount that you see at the bottom of the red is the required insurance that comes, so it goes directly to the fund.
That's what I was wondering,
And
yeah.
it offsets the amount we pay. So if our contribution for fire is 65%, that
Is offset by what we receive
it's
from.
the insurance credit offsets that, so our actual contribution. So we build that into our, when you look at our rates in the back of the table of your memo,
Right.
it says net of the fire insurance premium tax credit.
How did they determine that? How is that determined? Because I mean, I see that it fluctuates a little bit.
It
How is
does.
that based?
It's based on the actual insurance policies and what are paid in our city and collected from the taxpayers in the city who pay insurance, and they add to that insurance cost, they collect it. The Department of Insurance collects it, they hand it over to, there's another state agency in there, and then they ultimately funnel it to PSPRS, and then they tell us what our amount is, and we offset it by that amount. It's not a percentage, it's a dollar amount.
Is it only homeowners insurance or renters insurance? Do you know?
Now I have to look at that, I can't remember that. I
Curious to know.
think I thought it was homeowners liability insurance, but I'm not positive. I have to look at that.
Councilman Granville?
Thank you, Mayor. Another one, this again might be a rudimentary question, but so if it's the employer's contribution, we're looking at the year 17, 18, just so I make sure I understand this, for red, required employer contribution rate for fire, we'll say, or it could be police, but we'll use fire in this example. So if we've got an employee that makes $100 in a year, the cost of the city is $100 that we pay the employee plus $65. So now we're at $165 for a $100 employee. But are there other things I'm missing, like insurance or
No, so
whatever?
we also, for all employees, we will pay FICA for Social
Okay.
Security. Years ago, our firefighters opted out of Social Security, so we don't pay that FICA for them. So that's 7 point whatever it is. We don't pay that for them, but we do pay it for police. So all of those things. So of course you have insurance and other things, other benefits that you pay. This is just the amount that we pay to PSPRS on pensionable earnings. Pension,
$100 that I pay the employee means I pay $65 to PSPRS.
right,
Okay.
yes.
In addition to the $100. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So these are the rates, and as Vice Mayor Arredondo Savage pointed out, if you look at the fire, it reaches about 65%, but you can see about the first 4% of that, roughly, is paid from that fire insurance premium tax credit. So it nets out to about 60, I want to say, this year. And then this is just, the next slide is just the contributions in dollar amounts. Like I said, it's a totals about $25 million in the current year. This is what Councilmember Granville is asking about. So fire and police, you can see our contributions to those retirement systems and how those percentages have increased over the year. And then the orange line, the more flat line, represents our contributions to ASRS. But I added a slide here, and if you look at the next slide, it's slightly different, and that is, what are those rates if you include FICA? And you see that now the orange line goes up a little bit because we're contributing for those employees. The blue line goes up a little bit, but the red line stays where it was because we don't contribute to them. So if you count Social Security as part of your retirement contribution, that's what this slide would represent. It's your contribution to your state system and to Social Security. So that's why we included that slide. So one of the things we should talk about is system-wide versus local decisions. System-wide, I talked about that a little bit. They assume benefit changes, legal rulings, amortization periods, interest earnings, life expectancy, all of those are applied equally across the system. Some of the local decisions are the rate and the timing of pay increases. So they have an assumption for what pay and benefit increases are. We actually make those decisions on how we time that. The pensionability of benefits, to some extent we can control that, because different payments are pensionable. For instance, if you pay a bonus and it's paid once a year, it is not pensionable. If you pay it over 2 payments, it is pensionable. So we get to make that decision on how we pay that bonus. Contributions above the required amount. In any given year, they told us this last year for the very first time, that contribution that we give you is just a suggestion. It's the minimum amount. You should really be paying more than that. If you see your system deteriorating, you should be paying more to stabilize it. We were never told that before. This is something new. And then option to extend the amortization period is that new option that you've been given. This is what I was talking about when I talk about interest rates. The blue zigzag line represents the actual interest earnings of the fund. That's normalized with the blue dotted line to show what it is normalized. And then the red is what they actually projected in any given year that their interest earnings would be. So you can see that, you know, it widely fluctuates and it's not close to what they project it to be. So
The bigger dips was when we actually had a recession.
sure, yeah,
Obviously,
absolutely, absolutely. And the question of what you should assume over any given period of time is something that's made by the board of PSPRS, and ASRS does the same thing. They have to make that decision. So, you know, there are local decisions and there are the system-wide decisions that apply differently to different employers based on, I guess, the demographics of the workforce. So, for instance, Paradise Valley has said, we hire police officers that are seasoned police officers. We never hire rookies and train them how to be police officers. We catch the people coming out of the other cities and hire them all over here. So they get people that are close to retirement, and their pension contribution for police is really high because they have to make up a lot of money in a short period of time when those people retire. So the demographics of your workforce contribute to your rate, which makes every city a little bit different. So this compares employer contribution rates. You can see we're on the left, one of the higher rates that we contribute for both police and fire compared to our neighboring cities. And then if you look at the funded status on the next slide, the dotted lines represent the average, but you can see the funded status, again, we're on the far left there, police and fire, and our funded status is below our neighboring cities. So that's that. We have some specific direction and comments we want to get from you, and then any other questions you have regarding generic changes to our financial strategies or any other recommendations, we'd be happy to hear. So the ASDA reimbursements, like I said, I suggest that you wait until you see the Diablo study, but it's up to you. if you wanted to give direction tonight, you could do that, but I suggest you wait till you get more information.
If it's a pleasure to the I mean, we could wait till we get the study, but only thing I would recommend is that whatever that repayments we get from ASTA, that goes right back into the stadium, because we're going through a master plan anyways, and we know it's going to be more than what we're receiving, and we know we're going to be working with the Angels organization, because I've talked to them, a lot of people have talked to them, what they want to do. They want to stay here. They like Tempe. They like what's happening in our community. So that's a good sign, and I think if it's council pleasure, I mean, we can wait, that's fine. That's fine with me, but as long as we make sure that that money goes right back into it and we don't touch it.
It's completely up to
We can
you.
just go ahead and say
It's-
that to begin with. I mean, if everyone's okay with it, even though we still want to get the study back.
Yeah, definitely.
We can wait.
And then the PSPRS amortization period, again, you can give us direction tonight, or you can wait and see what those numbers are and how they might affect us. I mean, to be honest with you, the number that you would pay over the 30-year period is going to be much higher than the 20-year. It would be like extending your mortgage. When you see that, when you buy a house and they say, you're only paying this much and it's a $200,000 house, but over time with the interest you pay $500,000, it'll be like that. It'll be a big number.
What's the advantage?
But if you pay as if it were a 20-year or 15-year, you can pay however you want to pay, and you can lock in that amortization period if you wanted to.
I guess the advantage is that if there was a downturn in the economy and we needed some help, that's the only time we would say, okay, we got the extra cushion. But I would only do that if the council would agree that, I would only think that if we did go to the 30-year amortization, that we'd make sure that we paid either the 20 or even more than that to pay down that liability. Just be a little more. Robin, then Joel.
I think before I make a decision based on that, I think you mentioned that there's another city that is opted to do the 30-year but pay at 20. I'd be kind of curious to know what took them to making that decision, and what their bond rating is now, and what their thought of that impacting them.
I'm
I
pretty sure
think
it's
it might be
Mesa.
beneficial for us to at least get that information before we make a decision one way or the other. But I'm always curious because we always compare ourselves to other cities with funded or unfunded, and they're suffering the same situation we are. It's not like things have changed. Is it just that they pay more to fund their balance than we have percentage-wise?
I don't know. I haven't heard stories about many cities paying above their minimum contribution in the past.
I mean, I know
but
Chandler
many
was
more are
going-
thinking about it now.
Right. I know Chandler was seriously considering it until these new numbers came out, but
Right.
I know that's probably stunned a few people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to move forward, but
Joel?
No, I was just gonna just agree with Councilmember Aradon Savage. I think if we wait, obviously we have time to wait till March, get some more information. There's nothing's gonna hurt us on that, so.
Colby?
As to that, I agree. I mean, we can wait till
Yeah.
March of every year, so it's not like we have to make a decision anytime soon. And
But once we make a decision, then we can't go back.
But it's the grandfather thing,
that's
that,
why
or
they should
the,
take our time.
Until they change it.
yeah.
Right.
the other thing I wanted to point out is you had a sort of just a couple of bullet points, and there's more in our packet about ways that we can affect our contribution rates besides amortization by, when we make payments, if we make 2 payments a year, 1 payment a year in bonuses. I wouldn't want to make any decision on that now without having the full understanding of the benefits that it would get us. But I would be interested in at least knowing a higher level of detail. Like, if you did this, we would expect over 10 years it would save us X amount of money. If you did this, we would expect. So at the very least, we can make a more intelligent cost-benefit analysis. And it might be that we come to the conclusion that, the benefit isn't worth the cost. But based on a couple of bullet points and a little bit of information in a packet, there's just not a sufficient level of detail yet. But I'd love to see that so we can make a more educated decision.
Do you want us to pull that information together, Mayor? I actually considered at one point, I talked to Tom Dunsing out in Glendale and trying to go, and Jeff Nichols in Scottsdale, and said, what if we all went together and hired an actuary? Because PSPRS suggested this. They said, you should be paying more than your minimum. If you want to know how much more, hire an actuary, and they'll tell you how much more to get your payment down when you want. So we could hire an actuary and say, how much would local decisions affect this? How much would paying early?
Local decision, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Nice, good
We would
idea.
be,
Yeah.
okay.
There's a way to do it, to co-op with those other communities and see, get their buy-in to split the cost. I think that'd be.
Right.
Okay.
Other general comments or questions about finances?
Great job as always.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Next item, the Marianne Quarter Neighborhood Grant Program. If we can get that, Shauna.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Chad Weaver, Community Development, here with Shauna Warner, the Neighborhood Services Manager. Just to remind you why it is that we're here and a little bit of the timeline. It was in July of this year that you all approved this year's round of the neighborhood grants. And there were a few questions at the time about the overall amount of funding, whether it was adequate and whether the breakdown of who was getting the funding was fair and reasonable. So we submitted to you Friday packet a month or 6 weeks ago, which you have again here in front of you. So with that, we will go through the slides and explain a little more in depth about how the program is working and leave it for any questions that you might still have.
Thank you. So the grant program was created in 1994 as a means of investing in resident-initiated capital projects of community-wide benefit. Our eligible applicants are our registered neighborhood and homeowner associations, as well as our apartment communities that are fully certified in our crime-free multi-housing program. That means that they've made improvements to the property and undergone manager training with our crime prevention office and PD. Key to the program is that resident participation, selection of what they see as a need in their neighborhood, and following through with the application. Since the program's inception, there's been over $4.2 million invested in these types of projects. You do have the map that's on the screen as one of your attachments in case you want to zoom in. The darker colors indicate over the 20 plus years of the program a larger amount of cumulative funding since it started. The applicants can apply each year. This current fiscal year, as Chad had referenced, $175,000 was available. We had an additional $30,000 that was spent for our water conservation projects. The maximum grant amount is $10,000. We do have a lot of our associations combine efforts and funding when they have a shared community space, so that way they can realize some larger projects with that. And a match of at least a half of the total project cost is required for our HOAs and crime-free multi-housing communities. Our neighborhood associations are voluntary organizations and as such have no means to collect money. The neighborhood services does coordinate the program. We work with various staff from other departments in working with our neighborhoods on the application and in vetting all of the projects and getting staff approvals when on public property. We host a grant workshop. We have a website that has a lot of the information, including some of our successful grants in the past. The application cycle is that we make it available in the fall and due in the spring so that when the recommendation, the funding is approved, they do have a full year to actually complete the grant because they are capital projects, so it takes some time to get them finished. The next few slides will just show you some examples of previously funded grants. They typically fall into the categories that you see listed there. 2001 was the first time our neighborhoods came to us and asked for funding for art within their neighborhood. Since then, we have funded over 24 individual, I think we're about at 26 after this year, pieces of art spread out throughout Tempe and our neighborhoods. We also have done some traffic calming projects, anything from speed bumps to roundabouts, as well as chicanes. Our park improvement grants, parks are our community spaces for a lot of our neighborhoods, so we do see a lot of requests for park improvements. We work closely with our staff to make sure that it does complement any of our identified improvements that are coming up and funded in our 5-year CIP. Here's some examples of our landscape and wall grants, some with our low water use as well as some of our street trees for shading. Example of our signage grants, including our neighborhood identification signs that you see. The brown is the historic district and the blue are voluntary neighborhoods. We do have an interdepartmental team of staff that reviews the grants. That includes us all getting together and physically touring each of the project sites and meeting to make consensus recommendations. And the grant applications are evaluated on the criteria that is identified in the applications, and it does include addressing how they intend to maintain the project in the future as the one-time funding to complete the project. So that's a general overview, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody questions? Yes, Councilman Graham.
Yeah, so I'm the one who, I think this originally came about 3 or 4 months ago when we were voting on our budget. I tried to move this number. I was not successful. So then it got pushed, I think, to our retreat. It then got pushed from our retreat based on time, and so it became a cow item. You know, I think we're all huge fans of the neighborhood grant program. We all see the benefits of it. When we go to game night events, it's always the first thing people want to show us or talk to us about, the artwork or whatever. But when you adjust it for inflation, this fund has been going down year after year. So it initially started as a $10,000 grant. In today's dollars, I just did a quick calculator online, that would be a $16,800 grant. But of course, the maximum amount you can request is still $10,000. So the purchasing power has gone down by, what is that, 50%, right? 40%. And the same is true of the amount of money we funded. Previous councils and this council have been very generous in the amount that we have funded. But if you look at those dollar amounts, in 1996, we funded at $150,000. In today's dollars, that would be $239,000 when adjusted for inflation, which we don't do today. In 2001, council raised it to $225,000. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $317,000 today. So when you're talking about how much we allow people to buy and how much money we give them to buy it with, we're down pretty much across the board. And there are good reasons for that. There's economic reasons, there's PSRS, there's all sorts of stuff, right? There's a million things that need going on, whether that's streets, parks, whatever. But I think my request to council would be is that we provide direction to staff in next year's budget to do two things. Number one is to raise the amount that can be asked for up to $15,000 and advise staff to, from here and all future dates, index that to inflation so that we don't have to keep coming back and adjusting it year after year after year. And the second one is I do think that this is something that we should fund at a greater dollar amount. You're not going to come up with a number that shocks my conscience. I'd be perfectly happy with the $239,000 number. I'd be even happier with a higher number because I think the value of the neighborhood grant program far exceeds the amount of money spent or the thing that is purchased. Because often with neighborhoods, they form and they meet because of the neighborhood grant program, especially for neighborhood associations. It's often their main reason they get together every year. So the thing that it does regarding community pride, regarding knowing what your community needs better than all of us do, and what it does to creating social ties from a shared purpose, I think far exceed the money spent. So that's my pitch to council. I hope you guys will pick it up and run with it.
QB.
I sit here listening. I don't think you need to convince this council of the worthiness of the neighborhood grant program, and you weren't the only one who wanted to raise. Yeah, so
it was a close call when we did it.
Yeah, but let's not do too much
We all did it.
fanfare about that. But I do think there's an opportunity to increase the amount. Maybe we should, with our innovation fund, we could look at putting the same way of a conservation addition. The $30,000. Maybe some of our innovation fund could go to supplement it with ideas that are different. We have some repeating ideas with tree plantings and standpipes and such, but maybe we could supplement it with some innovation funding. Just want to throw that out there.
Councilman Navarro.
First, I would like to have the innovation discussion first before we go down that road. And then second, I agree with you. But I know in the inflation, just let it go by itself. I kind of worry. I don't worry about that. I just kind of wonder, as council goes through peaks and valleys, having the ability to what we have to cut, and maybe that still happens anyways. I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, I think when we come down towards our budget and we're looking at those green, yellow, and red lines and saying what can we do and how can we manage it, I say definitely let's put that in there.
I mean, like every single person in this council, and even council members before us, I think this is, we have a long history of supporting our neighborhoods, and we all care about the Mariana Quarter neighborhood grants. We have a long history of neighborhoods requesting more than obviously it's available. We have a lot of that with our social services, but the reality is, we, as Ken presented our forecast, we have some other challenges that are coming up. I know that over the last 2 years, I think 65 to 70% of all the requests that have been requested have been funded, which is good. I recognize at our peak, we were about 225,000. And there's been reasons why, as Councilman Graham mentioned, why we haven't been up to the levels of funding before because of economic
You're
circumstances. That was only because of a one-time additional money that was there. But the average is about 2.25. I mean, and I'm fine with getting back to 2.25, even a little bit above that. I would be amenable to that. It seems that one of the things I think that one of the residents, I think David mentioned, when it comes to projects that are, let's say, some of the stuff in the parks that we've seen, you know, some of that stuff falls in line with our CIP that they should be going through the neighborhood grant program to be funding some neighborhood parks. That's on us. That needs to be identified in some of our CIP stuff that we do. I'm open to the innovation fund to match that with some of the projects that could be part of the neighborhood grant program. I think it's a really great step of what we offer for a neighborhood grant program, but we're always going to have projects and needs that far exceed the resources that we have. And we also just need to be realistic as, I don't want to say, okay, let's go up to fund it to the full part of inflation, then we have to turn around and cut it back down because the economy tanks. I mean, I'd rather have some stability and be a little bit rational. And I would actually seek the advice of our financial department to see what would be reasonable and rational. I mean, we just put $500,000 into the innovation fund, which is far more than what we have. So for our grants, so if there's a way to tie some of that together to really spread that dollar amount over, I think it would be great. And also, when we measure the criteria of some of the grants, and I agree with some of the comments, I think we all do, like, you don't just put something in and all of a sudden, if they can't maintain it, it dies and it goes away. That's not good. That's not doing any of us any favors in terms of, especially when we talk about sustainability and equability and so forth. So I think that's something we need to look at as well as we look to enhance the process that we have. Councilman Graham, then Councilman Cubey.
Yeah, and I think, so the innovation fund, I think I agree with Councilman Devar. I think that's a separate discussion at this point. Also, in my mind, again, if there's money for neighborhood grants from the innovation fund, that's fine. I'll take the money that, you know, whatever we all agree on. But I think that's really meant for things that are, you know, new ideas that are, and a lot of the stuff that comes out of the neighborhood grant programs, they're dog parks, they're trees, they're monument signs, they're, you know, there's a lot of repetition that comes out of it. There's a lot of artwork that comes out of it. But if that's, you know, the pleasure of the council, that's fine to me too. I think my suggestion would be, if we're trying to come up with a number, could we set it at, you know, $12,000 or $15,000 for grants, change the dollar amount to $240,000, that splits the difference between $225,000 and $250,000. That gets us a little bit closer to where I think we all would hope we would be, given the constraints on the budget. And then I think, to go to your point, Mayor, I agree. I think as part of our scoring system, I could see us editing our scoring system so that one of the points in the scoring system is related to the tail of those costs, right? So if it's an art project, probably not, depending on the type of art, probably it would score well because there's no ongoing costs unless somebody hits it with their car.
Well,
But
that
if
happens. That's happened with
it does happen,
sandbags.
for sure. But there are other things where we know there are reoccurring costs because it's the very nature of the neighborhood grant that it will, you know. But, you know, when they put those little Hughes Acres historic neighborhood things in the toppers, I assume that would score, you know, pretty well on the sustainability chart. Because how often do we have to replace those? And even if we do, they're not that expensive. So I think that's a really valid thing to add to our scoring criteria in the future, but I'm not sure that's necessarily relevant.
And just to clarify how the project is
Oh, you already
maintained
do that.
is one of the
Yeah, see.
aspects that we
Because
have
they're
said is
smarter than I
listed
am.
on there. So,
We can agree on that.
She hasn't spoken yet. I'm gonna go to Robin, then I'm gonna go to Lauren.
You know, and I'm not definitely opposed to moving forward, and I don't know if I can tell you what that number is. I'm not ready to make that decision right now, but I think what I would like to know is, and the same thing I keep bringing up to you, Shauna, and it's not without effort, but maybe there is some other innovative ways, and maybe it has to do with the criteria of way we fund, because if you really look, I mean, there's so many different groups that have never received any funding or funding or very limited. I mean, you have some that are at $90,000 and some that are at $1,500, and so, I mean, what can we do to encourage more groups to apply and get creative and come together? And maybe it's bringing the collaboration with, you know, the neighboring other associations too. Because for me, I just don't want to keep doing the same thing that we've always been doing. And I think it would be important to really understand how many of them aren't getting funded on a regular basis over an average that we're not hitting the mark on. And is it because we would have funded them if we had the money, or is it really because they didn't meet the criteria? Because I know we've had that in the past. But I agree with Lauren too. I think that we could be creative of the way that we create some criteria that it could go through the innovation fund, and some of those dollars could be set aside for something that they're doing that maybe, you know, meet the criteria of innovation and something different within their neighborhood. So I certainly would support that. I'm not ready right this second to tell you exactly what that number is.
Lauren?
So I'm really happy, Councilmember Ardonna Savage, you brought up the equity frame, because looking at the list and kind of highlighting the ones that have received very little or not at all. I mean, a lot of them are homeowners associations. I know there's a unique challenge there because it's a match and it maybe isn't as attractive. And maybe we should be looking at that too and revisiting that homeowner association match. But the neighborhood associations that have not applied or have historically applied and received very little, is there any way we've helped build capacity there, or is there an opportunity maybe working? I know there's ASU School of Sustainability students who've spoken about wanting to go and help those neighborhoods and to, you know, put together a grant and you know, give assistance. Because some areas, you know, there's a lot of people who are working and don't have time necessarily to do a proposal, and they're not in the kind of in the way, you know, the protocol isn't as simple or as easy because they haven't done it 50 times.
Sure, just two aspects of that. One, I should clarify for the HOAs, the grant, you aren't eligible for your regular maintenance. So for example, as an HOA, you couldn't apply for money to replace roofs or to, if you have private streets, pave them. It does have to be something above and beyond. So something we do know with our HOAs is a lot of times they want to dedicate their funding to maintaining what they currently have and maybe not doing an additional enhancement. Just so we make sure on the HOAs, you guys know we haven't extended that to their regular maintenance. They would cover under their regular HOA collection dues, just so on that piece as well. And then as far as the applicants, you know, we keep the application, you know, we feel as simple as possible and really work with our neighborhoods on if they're interested in getting out there and in talking to them. You know, again, I think key to the program is it's neighborhood initiated. So I know a few of you were at a recent neighborhood association meeting with me, and you know, we bring it up and say, hey, this funding is there, and we really do work closely with them, but it has currently, as it's programmed, it really is coming from the neighborhood as, you know, a point of their own community pride and identifying. It hasn't been us saying, oh, you kind of need this. It's been them saying, this is a need in our neighborhood, and we work closely with all of them. And they go through ebbs and flows of activity. We have some that are reactivating that haven't been active in a while. We have some that are just continuously have that leadership to show it, but we do try to keep the application as simple as possible and help them through the process, as well as extending offers to help them fill out the application, whatever resources they need for finding ways to do the project.
But sometimes at ASU, I work with faculty, fresh faculty members who have never applied for grants, and they often need their hand held and need a mentor, someone to help them through the process the first time. And might there be an opportunity for maybe a neighborhood that has had a lot of successful applicants, maybe a resident could help another neighborhood to guide them and help them through the process, or just something to, I think, would help with the whole equity frame that we need to fill in.
And one of the things that isn't mentioned is the winning grants are all available as PDFs online. So if you know you want to do something, you literally can download somebody else's winning grant, you know, borrow their contractor and just scratch out their name and put in your name as the neighborhood association doing it. It's to call it a grant, I think, is to make it sound more sophisticated than what we normally think of as grants.
So I think you're hearing from the council. I mean, I would have our Ken Jones and his team see what is feasible and rational as in terms of trying to increase the amount that will fit within our budget, within the constraints we have, and then also look at some of the criteria that was mentioned, and to be really, I mean, it's up to the individual associations and HOAs whether or not they were apply and they have matching funds, as we all mentioned. But if we can do a little more help with engaging our residents and who may not have the knowledge how to get in touch with us, or even though we offer that, as Lauren said, help them along with the process, I think that's something that's encouraged as well. So if you can help with that. Is that pretty fair?
$1,000 dollar amount. Do you want to have staff look at that as well? What do you want to do?
I think when they come back, I think it'd be good to have that discussion when they come back, that we know how much money is there, because I just, just think, remember, when you increase the amount, you also have to, that also increases the matching part. So if you increase for the HOAs, I mean, like, or even some of the other stuff, we always want to have matching. I mean, the HOAs have to have it, but just keep that in mind. All right, and before, I know I'm gonna take a little interruption. Let's congratulate Vice Mayor Redondo Savage. She's getting inducted to the Mesa Community College Hall of Fame.
No Thunderbirds. I don't know what that is.
How long have you been here?
Congratulations.
Been there, inducted.
So, Mayor, if I could just clarify then, so we will not bring anything back right away, but during the budget process, we will work with Ken.
Prior to the budget process, we need to have this discussion of what that amount looks like for neighborhood grants. We want it more than what it is now. I would defer to our staff because the financial constraints we have, and then bring that back to us and see what makes sense.
Are we talking about doing this for the 18-19 budget year start or this budget year?
No, 18-19.
It's already expended for this year.
It's not this year. It's for the upcoming budget that we talked about.
Putting a supplemental process.
Not a supplement. No, this is for the upcoming budget process.
Okay, that shouldn't be a problem.
That we can come back, but it needs to come back before our budget process. I would like to have this come back so we can have a little more discussion.
Yeah, and just from a timing standpoint, we do need to, as soon as possible, get the grant application out so that part of it is community involvement and talking about what they want to do, and it certainly would influence that discussion if it's 10 or 15
So
or
that's
kind of the amount. So
all the
just-
more incentive for us to have this back
Well,
sooner rather
yeah.
than later, to your point.
They're already calling.
And, I mean, I agree with you, Councilmember Granville, that if we're going to increase the overall amount, that it makes sense to increase the individual amount, because if costs have gone up for individual projects as well, we should be paying notion to that. So.
That's fine. But then it comes back to, I agree with that, and that's good to have that discussion. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next is, you guys shouldn't go, or Chad, you need to stay here. The innovation criteria and process. Elizabeth, Ken, or whoever.
Mayor and Council. So just to start off with a little bit of background on the Innovation Fund. As part of the FY 17-18 budget negotiations, direction was given to include a non-reoccurring $500,000 allocation in that year's budget for an innovation fund. The council conveyed that it was their intent to encourage and promote new and creative ideas that would maybe address some of those existing challenges that we have in place. Because innovative ideas, as we know, can help keep us ahead of the curve and creatively solve some of these issues that we see in our community. The council then discussed the Innovation Fund at the council retreat on September 1st. And you guys talked about a specific allocation criteria for which the Innovation Funds could be granted. There was some broad agreement across the discussion, and I've attempted to sort of get that broad agreement here in these bullet points. So hopefully I was successful. One, that the funds could be used for something that had a direct community impact. So alternative approaches to existing problems that have a visible community impact, something that was real and a timely issue in our community. Two was the unique and measurable impact on the triple bottom line. This is something that would maybe enhance a service, provide an efficiency, provide a cost savings, or maybe generate revenue to the city. The third was promote partnerships with benefits. So this would be working maybe with somebody outside of the city, maybe an NGO or ASU or something, maybe leveraging matching funds to do something that would be innovative in our community. Another one was it could be a pilot program, a one-time project that maybe is a high-risk, high-reward type of project or idea. And then number 5 was that it would align with council priorities. So would the idea achieve the advancement of a council priority or a strategic performance measure? There was also discussion that you guys had about what wouldn't be eligible for funding, and some of those things were, some of the things that we're already doing. So it wouldn't replicate or supplement current staff salaries or existing budgets. There would be no pet projects or slush fund spending, no single group benefits, no scholarships. not things that we've done before in the past, not bringing them back unless they're updated or different, and it wouldn't go to ongoing costs of a post-pilot program. You guys had a conversation about the protocol for submission that was not quite finished up by the end of the retreat, so I've tried to take some of the themes from that and encompass that in a staff recommendation. We're happy to modify any of these criteria in accordance with council direction. The ideas could be submitted by employees, council members, the public, community organizations, or businesses. That would recognize that members of the public would be able to submit proposals that may or may not be administered by the city. The submission would include a summary of the current challenge, the innovative solution, why it's innovative, and it would address the council priorities, how it's advancing a performance measure, what steps would need to be taken to actually reach the desired goal, the desired outcome, and it would detail how the idea would affect a city department or the staff that was implementing the idea. The staff recommends that these ideas be submitted to the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity, and they would determine the applicability of a council priority or a strategic manager or management priority, or performance measure, sorry. And also we do currently have an employee, it's called Tempe Employee View Program. It's run through the auditor's office, and employees can put in suggestions, innovative suggestions to improve how the city does business. So anything that came in through that portal that would qualify would also be forwarded to go through this process. It's our recommendation that the ideas be vetted on a quarterly basis by the Strategic Management Office, and that they would forward the ideas to the city manager, who would assemble an innovation council made up of city staff. And then that staff would then meet quarterly to review the submissions that were forwarded from the Office of Strategic Management, and they would make recommendations to the council. Obviously, the council would then ultimately approve which types of funds were ultimately approved. Some cities do it in a way where they separate the types of grants out by size. They have maximum grants and micro grants. So just sort of encompassing that idea, there's two types of awards that could be created. A maximum grant would be the $25,000 to $125,000 range. A micro grant could be anything from $1, which probably is unlikely, but to $25,000. So if the council likes that idea, we could move that forward. And then we would measure the success of the supplementals, or of the submittals, sorry, that are funded by working with the Strategic Management Office. They would work with the ideas that are funded to show the clear metrics for evaluating success and make sure that they're working to meet those goals. Some things that might be considered: was the desired outcome achieved? Was there a return on the investment? What was the impact on the priority or the performance measure? Was there a cost saving? How far-reaching was the idea? How many different stakeholders were impacted? So it's just looking for council direction on how to move forward with the Innovation Fund and implement the process, both the criteria, if you agree to the ones that were laid out, and the protocol for submission.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kiwi.
So I have a few concerns that we have, as we hear echoed from some of the residents, Carl Parrish and Ann Till, that we're a little bit restrictive, and if we really want to innovate and spark innovation, if we hamper it with so many hurdles, and maybe it's just the way it's described, the intention is not there, I don't think, that we might actually hamper the innovative aspects of it. I think the system really needs to be flexible, and it needs to, as Carl Parrish said, to pivot when needed. And I think I was even the one that recommended that the Innovation Council, but when I think about this and read it, I think that it's going to actually just create a slowness to the process, and just the way it takes, how it can take so long sometimes to set up a meeting with people, it could just really hamper that. And then I think about the council. We have regular meetings, twice, 3 times, 4 times a month, and a couple of work study sessions. Couldn't the Innovation Council be encompassed within our meetings? And do we really need to have a separate Innovation Council? It's one thing I'm bringing up. Also, there's a cow, we do have a cow process, so I don't think we have the intention that we would work on an idea through a cow. Let's just say the the feral cat, the trap neuter release program you worked on with Corey Woods. Would you work on that, and then you would have to then go through the Innovation Council to get approval? That seems to be a little redundant. I think we need to accommodate the COW process, and if we're getting, three additional votes, if one person's putting it forward, if you get 4 votes and you have approval, we should make it, and it's not written in there, so that's why I bring it up. It doesn't make sense to me either, Councilmember Granville, but it seems like we should have a way to forward those council-approved ideas from the COW process, which always generally involve partnerships anyway, right? And maybe we have to, when we fill out our COW memo, we have a memo that we fill out that shows how it meets the innovation criteria. If we are indeed going to ask for funding through the Innovation Fund, I mean, I think that's an interesting idea. But I just have, a few concerns that we've also created these the clear metrics for evaluating success. Sometimes success isn't going to be, it's not going to be a bottom line success. It's not going to be, it won't meet all the triple bottom line criterion. But if something builds community, is that a success? It may not show monetary value. Let's think about Daly Park. They put in peach orchard, and the actual, if that ends up resulting in, they have a peach festival, 5 years from now, that's going to be something that builds community, but you're not showing necessarily a return on investment or something that it's like a quantifiable success. Building community and happiness, frankly, is not necessarily quantifiable. We're all part of this, the city of Tempe is part of this Sustainable Neighborhoods for Wellbeing and Happiness project in Victory Acres, along with Jenny Norton, Habitat for Humanity. And there are some measurable things there, but you can't really measure happiness in that exact way. And if we do, I don't think we want to go around with calipers trying to measure happiness. So I think we need to be somewhat open in the way we measure the success, that we need to really let our innovation flag fly and keep the process fluid. And that's my opening gambit.
Mayor, would you get a chance?
Go ahead, Councilman Navarro. Then we'll go to
Yeah,
Councilman
no,
Navarro.
I just listening to how the structure was laid out and listening to the lady that came at the beginning of the council meeting, I would love to incorporate what she said at the beginning of the meeting and have staff look at that. I like the structure of what the intent is. And I kind of, when this was brought to my attention years ago at a league conference, LA was the city that was doing the Innovation Fund, and how they're doing it, they kind of they limit it to really employees and the commission or the council to come up with the innovation, submit it through a process, and it's online and it explains how the process and it explains the categories of exactly what are strong criteria and how they would get graded and all that good stuff. I think we're trying to achieve that. I do want to get away from, and I know we've had council members in every council meeting, hey, the Innovation Fund will do this. Hey, the Innovation Fund will do this. And pretty soon it's not going through a process. It's basically just going through a council member that wants to utilize a fund. So it's almost turned into a pool of money, and we're just going to take some money out of this pool. Really, we're not doing an innovation thing. There should be a process. There should be guidelines. There should be the input from, if we're opening it up, and maybe that's something we look at. Maybe we don't open up as big at first. Maybe we open up, just to employees or residents of Tempe. I don't know. That's something to look at. But I think, and I don't know, and the other thing is, I don't know if a quarterly process or a biannually process is better than a quarterly process, because you do want to be able to measure, against other innovative ideas, and I kind of worry about taking a big chunk off, I guess, of opening the floodgates, and then all of a sudden we're flooded with all this. Okay, where do we go from here? And we have staff members that are going to be really taxed on trying to find out what is qualified, what's not qualified. So maybe if we do go down this road, and if staff wants to re-engage looking at it, maybe we lessen how we started off with to get a grasp of the process. But one of the things I do want to advocate is it should be for innovative ideas. It should be for ideas that impacts the city on a variety of different categories, financially, quality of life, whatever it is. but I think it should come from those individuals, not from the council during the discussion at a, very passionate moment. Let's just take it out of the innovation fund. That's where I want to get away from. I do want to process. So that's it.
Okay. Councilman Granville.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I tend to lean more towards Councilmember Cuby's take on this for a couple of things. Number one is I think we can list criteria. First of all, I think that the Innovation Fund applications, whether they're residents, if they're residents or staff, I think they just immediately come to our next meeting. There's no reason to make it a 3-step process. If it's one of our new Cal items, I agree. You just staple it to the back and say, this is how it scores. This is how it fits the funding criteria. And so I agree with all of that for sure, because I think the faster, like you don't want to tell someone, you've got a great idea, and in 6 months or 4 months or 8 months or what, it's not the way that's going to work. The other thing is, I think the criteria, I think we should have criteria. I think the criteria will inherently be political if it comes to this body, right? So some resident brings something up and a council member doesn't like the idea, and they're going to say, well, I don't really agree with your assessment of the budgetary impacts. I'm voting no. All right, fine. I don't really agree. So regardless of what the criteria is, it's still at some level going to be each council member saying to themselves, is this idea worth this amount of money? Right? And they might shoehorn it into a criteria. And so something like a peach orchard, it would be very easy for someone to say, well, how do you measure that? So instead of having that be their sort of crutch of why they say no, don't give them that crutch. Have them say, look, I don't think a peach orchard is innovative. I don't think it's something that's unique that wouldn't go through our traditional budget process. I don't think it's whatever. And frankly, I don't think it's worth the money in this limited pool of money. And then they can go and compete in a more traditional way. Because I think at the end of the day, we're just going to have to, eyeball it, but the best we can.
Before I go to Dave, I want to comment on some of the things that have been mentioned. First and foremost, I really think whatever innovation idea comes from anybody, it has to fit within our strategic priorities.
I agree with that 100%.
First,
100%.
Okay, I do. I tend to agree with Councilman Granville on I don't think it should come to us either, because I think it's going to become, as you mentioned, and there's a reason why we have the Tempe Community Council. I'd rather have an independent group, whether it's made up of some of the staff, along with Rosa's office, to look at the ideas and the innovation projects that come through. I think that's a better analysis than us looking at it for multiple reasons, as you mentioned. I agree with Councilman Kuby when Paris mentioned, I really do think that just because it doesn't have financial benefit, there's a ton of unintangible benefits of something, how you measure something. Last night at the DTA, state of our downtown, I would tell you it was a great presentation that was given, and one of the ideas is you can't measure certain innovative projects come through right off the bat. It's going to take some time. So I think part of the stuff, we shouldn't be tied to a fiscal amount, but it should be, as long as it fits within the strategic priorities of the council's goals, and we see that as an innovative idea, it may benefit, something may happen further on. It doesn't have to be necessarily a financial benefit, but I think if it does impact our community for the better, so be it. The other thing, I think it's very important. The reason why I would have a separate body is for the no pet projects, the single group benefits, and so forth. We have in there where council agreed that funds would not be eligible for the following. I think those need to be in there as well. Those bullet points that's listed in our memo. And I'd like to hear David and Randy and anyone else that would like to comment.
Yes, Mayor. Innovations happen when you provide some flexibility and you don't overly sanitize a process. I've talked before about, and I'm sure you've heard before, how the sticky note was invented because 3M allowed their employees to have flexibility and to basically take sabbaticals and just go play around and try out different stuff. And a guy who had invented this really terrible adhesive met a guy whose bookmark kept falling out of his book, and they said, hey, why don't we use this really terrible adhesive to put it on pieces of paper on bookmarks so that they'll stay in your book. And then eventually they started writing notes on them, and now you have sticky notes, probably $1 billion product. I think if we overly sanitize the process and we just do a sort of budget light process where we say, hey, 4 times a year or 8 times a year, we're going to review projects like we normally would. We're going to put it through this robust staff process and then get recommendations from some third-party committee, and then the council ultimately will vote and approve. I mean, that's not really a flexible, free-thinking process. I like the last thing Colby said, which was, you know, at some point, when it comes to innovation, at some point, you got to kind of eyeball it. You know, Steve Jobs was not a brilliant CEO of a company because he was a great business manager. He was a great CEO because he was great at theorizing things, eyeballing things, and saying, you know what, I think people would like the product to have rounded corners. You know, there was no engineer that came and said, well, rounded corners appeal to the eye this way, and it's going to affect the company's bottom line in this aspect. That's not what innovation's about. Innovation's about kind of using your gut to look at something and say, hey, I think this may actually produce something cool. And I don't even necessarily know what the cool thing is. That's what innovation's about. It's not saying, I know this is going to make us this amount of money. I know it's going to save us X. I know it's going to have this kind of return. That's not what innovation is. That's just planning. Innovation is, this seems like a great idea. I don't know what the benefits of this are going to be, but I'm willing to try it out and see what the benefits will be. So I don't know if those are any kind of, I don't know if I'm giving you any kind of direct feedback, but more just to say, like, if we're going to call it the Innovation Fund, let's use innovative entrepreneurial tendencies criteria instead of just having a budget process light where we're overly sanitizing everything.
Now, I do think in terms of flexibility, obviously we have to be flexible, but you have to have some criteria that, especially if it has to affect our strategic priorities, first and foremost. If we can all agree with that, I mean, that needs to happen. And the flexibility part, I'm totally in line with the flexibility part, but it still has to come back to what we agreed to that's part of this memo. And I agree with the flexibility. And I don't know if you understood what I was saying. I don't, being flexible, just because I don't think we should be the deciding factor. I think it'd be more innovative to have someone else do it for us to come up with the innovation fund, because it takes the so-called politics out of it, to be quite frank. And I agree with Councilman Granville on that. So.
I mean, I agree with you, but I also think that to have it limited to sort of 4 times a year, there may be an opportunity that comes on the scene that we need to seize, or there's an opportunity that's identified, and it's timely nature. There's a timely nature and urgency to it. And just to set it up with a council and looking over it and the applications, I think formalizes it in a way that won't hamper its innovative potential.
I'm open to that, but I guess I would ask us, and in doing that, you know, Councilman Navarro brought up the fact that we got to make sure it's competing with other innovative projects. You don't want to do, if you start doing one-offs, you don't really know what's out there. So you have to have some time frame. That's why we have budget, that's why we have certain schedules and stuff.
Well,
but I mean, like, so if we have
anecdote.
quarterly, or it could be before quarter, I mean, we could do it even biannual or even sooner. I'm just saying, like, if you do it, you have to give ample time to get all those innovative ideas come forward. So we're not just doing one-offs without looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Mayor.
Joel, then
Mayor.
Lauren.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the thing. I feel that if we do it like 8 times a year, or all we're doing is, okay, that's next, and we're not hearing the vast. I guess it's not like it has to have some sort of timely process to get a collection of good ideas, and I guess what I'm trying to get to is I really would want this from the community or from the employees, because they might have this great idea that no one's listening to them, and they have a way of delivering that idea. And I think that's a great opportunity. And maybe I'm hearing, and maybe I'm not hearing this, but are we saying the council should be out of this process and it should be from the community or the employees? Because I would agree with that.
You do or you don't?
Because I think the council still does what the council does. We still have our CAL meetings. We still do, what we've been doing. We just don't use that innovation fund to help the next subject matter that we come up with for next week. The innovation process goes through the employees, through the community, and that's that. And however many times a year, I think we need to look at, but I wouldn't want to flood it down too much and have it too often, I guess. That's
Maura?
it.
One of the reasons I suggested this innovation fund in the beginning was because we're sort of hampered by the budget process at looking things in a yearly way, and we sometimes miss opportunities and we miss ideas that come forward because they just don't match the cycle of our budgetary decisions. So, I mean, and obviously, Councilmember Navarro, I think there should be a process. So when you say, like, we have to have a process, yes, I agree. We need to have a process. My point is not to hamper it so much that we defeat the whole purpose for creating the fund. And if we have if we want to have a council, it seems to be a consensus, we should have a council that decides these things. I don't think it should be a large council. I think it should be small. I think it should also probably be at almost the city manager's level or appointed by people, the city manager, not necessarily associated with individual departments. We don't want departments fighting over, well, this is more public works and I like this, but you guys had one and this is neighborhood services. And, we don't want it to be something like that, but more of a few people that can get together more easily, more quickly, because, again, to limit it to quarterly, that's a process that will kind of restrict, I think, the opportunities that might come in.
I think we're hearing that we
Mayor?
want more than quarterly.
Yeah.
And I think, and I agree about not having very many individuals as a council to decide the success of innovation, recipients, innovation fund recipients. So I think if we could come up with a number, if not quarterly, I agree with you, but there still has to be and we all know there's a process. And when innovative ideas come forward, you still have to have a process and mechanism. We can't just shoot from the hip because there's a process.
Did I say we should shoot
No,
from the
I didn't
hip?
say that. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying wrong terminology. Like, don't take it like that. I didn't mean it like that. I meant there's always going to be stuff that comes up, and nothing's ever going to perfectly fit within some of the process. So I'm open to more than just quarterly, and I think the council's open to more than just quarterly. What that number is, I don't know, and that's what I'm trying to come to a common ground with the council to see what would make sense. Could it, be 6 times a year? I don't know the answer to that.
Maybe we don't have to decide how many times.
No,
a year.
we don't
Maybe
have to do
let
right
them
now,
come to us and
But
say,
when
yeah.
we do decide to do it, we have to let people know that there's a certain time frame when to submit for innovation fund, because then that's when they get all their ducks and they start thinking about it. Otherwise, you're going to start getting one-offs if we have multiple. So if you have, okay, maybe we do it 5-6 times a year, then people know a certain time frame we do it, or every 3 weeks or something. I don't know the answer. That's something we need to discuss, because you have to set some program in place. Otherwise, you're going to start getting these one-offs, and we're not really measuring innovative ideas against other innovative ideas based on the strategic priorities. We're just doing it as they come in. You see what I'm saying? So then some will have an advantage over the others because maybe they have this, someone's been sitting around, you have an idea that's ready to go, innovative idea, and then that's the only one that's competing. That's what I don't want. Well, it's not, talk about equability. That's what I mean by equability, and I think we all do, is having the opportunity to compete on a level playing field for certain innovation opportunities is all.
Mayor?
Wait, Colby, then Joel?
I think, first off, I think I got a little bit misunderstood on what I meant about it being a political process. I actually think in this case it should be a political process, because I think I like the way we do agency review, but in something like this, I think in this case, I think you don't, there's a fourth branch of government in the federal government, and that's every single agency they created because they didn't want to make policy decisions, right? And that's how you end up with the EPA and water and all these other. And I think that for us, I think the buck does stop here on what is and is not innovative funding. And so I think we should be the ones making those decisions. We should be the ones held accountable for that decision making. We'll use David's example with Free Pre, right? I wouldn't want this council to say that never came up because he couldn't get it through an innovation fund, because that then takes the burden of responsibility off of us from making a decision. I would want the public to hold us accountable for voting yes or no on that decision. and not rely on some agency and say, well, it didn't meet our criteria. That said, if we do end up going with some agency, I mean, in this case, the city manager and whoever he appoints, I think the criteria is pretty simple. You say all applications will be reviewed within 60 days of submission. And that means if you submit it on day 1, within 60 days, you're going to get it. And if you submit it on day 58, then maybe yours is going to get reviewed at the next meeting in 2 more days. But that way, there's a continual, and we just take them as we come. And when they come in, you got 60 days. They're going to meet. They're going to have a quick meeting, agendize it, and make it happen.
So you want to,
I'm confused about what
Yeah.
that means to make it happen. Make it
Yeah.
happen, meaning
Vote
that-
up or down.
who?
I think the mayor's implying that you would, or whatever his
You
committee
could
was.
rate them, rank them, and then present it to us for the final decision.
That would be fine.
yeah.
I'd be much more inclined to do that. And that way we would have a
Just to
score
be
sheet
clear,
or something
because
like that.
you're taking some words, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be accountable for the decisions we make. I'm just looking at, part of what we discussed at the retreat was that actually Lauren brought up as her suggestion, to have a committee of individuals to do it other than us.
We were brainstorming.
But that was, and that's fine, I'm just saying, I was just going along with what was
So
said.
if a committee
But I will
reviewed
tell
it,
you-
analyzed it, and scored it, or
The
brought it
only
back
thing-
to us.
The only thing that I
I'd
would be
fine.
hesitant about is, because we only have so much money. So if you take them as they come in, if we don't have a process in place, it's going to be those first individuals that get an innovation idea right off the bat.
You could limit the money expended quarterly, right? You could limit, we have,
We could.
we have
This is why we're
125,000
having this
quarter.
conversation.
It's been
'cause
4
we
months
need
and
to
we
have a-
haven't, spent a cent. So we could limit it by quarter, like we'll spend a quarter of it each, that way, that's a way of holding back from funding it all at once, right?
But you wouldn't be
Mayor.
compelled to spend it if there
We
weren't
wouldn't
enough,
be compelled if we
enough
didn't think-
innovative ideas that came
Right.
forward.
David?
Actually, I think Joel,
Mayor?
Oh, then David.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. No, I can agree with what has kind of been said about having a screening mechanism before it gets to council. Maybe the council has the final decision. That's fine. One thing is, and I don't know if staff has done this, but maybe reaching out to LA City or some of these other places that have done the innovation process and actually find out, hey, what has been some of the obstacles timeline? Does it make sense to do it quarterly or biannually or whatever it is? I think you probably get some great input from those cities on, hey, listen, here's some of the obstacles that we have, and this way makes sense, and this doesn't make sense, and here's how the process is going. So if staff has done that, great. But if not, I think we definitely need to reach out to those cities and find out how that looks. In terms of remembering, we're just adding something new to get some great ideas. That's all we're doing. I kind of feel that our council business is still going on the same way. And this innovation idea, in my mind, is just this we're allocating X amount of money for great ideas that are going to help the city, and they're going to go through a system of whatever that system is to have that money allocated. One of the things that when we talk about, well, if we limit the money every quarter to this amount, you might be limiting yourself to a great innovative idea that's going to muster up a lot more money. But, at the end of the day, we're probably saying, hey, you know what? We're going to sacrifice all these other innovative ideas because this one large one has really bang for the buck. So there's something to be said about how we limit money or possibly not limit money. I don't know. That's something to dive into a little bit further if that's what we're having a discussion tonight on. But, once again, I just think that if we're talking about innovation and we're coming from the employees and citizens, it's kind of like that's where it should come from. If we're talking about a pool of money allocated for the council because we have ideas and we have a resource and we need to gain, right now reaction and we need to pull some money out now for this and the council agrees on it, that's probably a different discussion and a different terminology for a different pot of money if we have that pot of money. So I kind of see them as two different things, and I don't know if everyone else agrees with that or not.
Okay. Councilman Shapiro?
thank you, Mayor. I sort of disagree with Lauren's original idea of why she wanted to do this in terms of breaking up the budget process and having an opportunity mid-year to be able to get funding for things that weren't necessarily able to go through the budget process. I shouldn't say I disagree with it. That's not my reason for wanting an innovation fund. I think that's a nice.
That was one part of it.
No, I
It's not my
totally
whole
understand.
thing.
Just trying to find a place to disagree with you, where we get that. I think we need to be innovative with our innovation fund. And by that logic, I don't know if I want to go by what other cities are doing. And so, I think this is a great way for us to try out something new. And so I'm much less interested than Joel is in what other cities are already doing with this. On the issue of, who makes the decision, I agree with Colby and Lauren in that the council is the right place for the ultimate decision on this to be made for a few reasons. One, the voters already, they elect us in part to make budgeting decisions. We are their representatives. Our staff are, we have an awesome staff in this city, but they're not the ones who've been selected by the residents of this city to make decisions. We are the representatives. We are accountable to them. If we pick something really stupid and spend a whole bunch of money on it and it ends up being a total waste, we're the ones that they should be mad at, not our staff. And so, I'm fine with that accountability. And like Lauren said, we meet frequently, 3-4 times a month, which gives us lots of opportunities to talk about this. But, more than anything, I'm looking more and more at every decision I make on the council from the position of a citizen, because in less than a year, I'll be back to that when it comes to city issues. And so I think of what I would want my council to do in this respect. And I know sometimes it's hard when we're sitting up here to say, we want to be the ones to make the decision, because you don't want to be seen as power hungry or whatever. But with my citizen hat on, I think it's the council. I want to make this decision. I want to make these decisions. Now, I think one of the things I heard talked about at the retreat, which I think is a process that makes more sense, is our staff should certainly be the clearinghouse for collecting this information, which they are on everything already. I agree with Joel that the ideas can and should come from residents, from staff members, but also even from council members. We're residents of the city as well. And I think the staff should collect those ideas, and whatever frequency we decide to bring these ideas to council, I would err on the side of more frequency. They should present the ideas to council, and council should ultimately use what did you say, eyeball it, and decide what ideas make most sense to invest in.
So
Elizabeth.
I just wanted to clarify. I did check in with what a couple of other cities are doing. I think the original memo referenced Portland and their innovation fund. They had an employee-driven innovation fund. It's I checked in on that one, and it's my understanding that it's no longer in place. It was a project of the previous mayor, and now there's a new mayor, and it was not re-upped. And the LA, they do have a commission, an innovation commission. They take the ideas on a first come, first served basis, and they say in their process, in their upfront, that they anticipate funding about 10 ideas. So they have $1 million fund, so they have it a little bit more flexible.
To kind of sum up what we've kind of discussed is I think it's important to have a innovative member, not many members, but some, to vet it. That was originally part of the memo. And I think it's great that we should be held accountable for decisions, but I also think there's we get ideas and recommended bodies and the boards and commissions and what they offer. So this would be act no different. So I think if Andrew can set up a limited number, I don't know what number we would be okay with, anywhere from 3 to 5 individuals or from 2 to 3. You have to have an odd number. I'd say even 3 individuals would be fine if the council's okay with that. If you're looking at a process in terms of frequency, I'm all for having more opportunities, but at the same time, we need to determine a process so that people understand that there is an opportunity to submit an innovative idea. And then if we advertise it, however we do it, I think it's important. In full transparency, and what we always preach, it's important that we just have to have that information out for the public to know that there's an opportunity to submit an innovative idea that fits within our strategic priorities. And I have to stress, and I think the council agrees, that it needs to fit within our strategic priorities in order for it to be innovative. And then the amount could also determine the frequency of the submissions, and in terms of what is that amount? And what happens if, you know, as Councilman Navarro mentioned, what happens if there's some really kick-butt innovative idea, but it exceeds the amount that we're allocating? Are we subject to the flexibility of that? And I think that's something that we should be, you know, flexible as well, because we have some ideas that can do that. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor. What you said is along the lines of some of the things I was thinking about as I was trying to think about how we as staff might take this discussion and summarize and work on something. And I had a couple of thoughts about that. One is, you know, you've got $500,000 and it is budgeted as a one-time in this budget year. So this discussion about whether it should be 4 times a year, 8 times a year, really, we don't know whether or not in the next budget year there will be a future recurring allocation of $500,000 or not. So I'm limiting my thoughts to what we have in front of us, which is the $500,000 that's been set aside for the Innovation Fund. One of my thoughts is that if, in fact, it's the consensus of council to open this up to the public, to city employees, to departments, to council members, that if everyone has an opportunity to apply, I think we can handle that. And the way I think you handle it is, at some point, when you open up a notice to all interested applicants that we're now accepting applications for Innovation Fund funding ideas, that at the point at which we get enough applications that the amount of request of dollars exceeds the amount available in the fund, that automatically sets up a degree of competition, right? Assuming that they all meet some minimum qualification, if you have more applications than you do dollars, then you're going to have to make a choice. And they all may be innovative, but at some point, if they come forward and you say, we like about $250,000 worth of these, and the rest of them we say no to, then the next time we say we're open up for the second round, the new round says we have $250,000, and then at the point we get more applications than the amount of money it's in, it comes back to council. And each time you do that, there's a competition because people will know I'm competing for a scarce amount of dollars, and it becomes progressively scarce every time you make an award. Maybe the first time out, you award $500,000 and we're done. Maybe that takes 10 rounds. I have no idea because we don't know in advance what level of innovation you're going to get examples of, and we don't know what type of funding they may ask for. And we don't know whether or not if they ask for $100,000.
I agree. I think that's all I've been trying to say is I agree with what's just been said.
Right. So we don't know whether or not if someone asks for $100,000, you may look at it and say, I really only feel this merits $20,000 or something. And you may want to give less than. And you have some flexibility to do that, potentially, if that's the pleasure of council. My thought about, in terms of vetting it and setting up a council, a committee to look at the Innovation Fund, to me, the things that we'd want to look for in order to really give council an opportunity to say we want to encourage and stimulate innovation, the criteria you see there, I think, provides a framework for the sorts of things that we expect. Whether or not they meet that certainly can be a criteria for ultimately saying we want to fund that or not. But for getting something in front of the council, I'm thinking more in terms of minimum qualifications. Is it a project that actually impacts Tempe, or is it some, you know, offsite Bahamas corporation that's going to use it to, you know, fund a hedge fund somewhere in Europe? Probably not related enough, and you'd say no, right? And we would have the opportunity to say no to certain things. Is it for
Russia and rubles.
Right, you know, I mean, or is it for something that has nothing to do with the council priorities? Or is it legal? Quite frankly, one of my biggest concerns, and I'm kind of echoing what I'm thinking that Judy's thinking is, you got to make sure that it meets our fiduciary duty. So when we expend dollars that are taxpayer dollars, that it goes to something that has some
benefit
relationship to a governmental purpose that falls within the broad authority of the city of Tempe. 2, we got to make sure it doesn't violate the gift clause. We can't just say, I've got a great idea and you're going to be super excited about when you see it in 2 years, just give me 50 grand and I promise I'll send a postcard. You know, something like that isn't going to cut it because we have potential gift clause issues. So my point is, assuming they can meet those minimum hurdles, and I mean minimum in the sense that we at least lay out some pretty black and white criteria. It says, if you fail these, then they never come here. But if they do, and if they state something that seems to be rational related to these criteria, I think you should see them. And what I'm hearing is that may be the pleasure of council, depending on whether they agree with my summation. But if that's the case, then you see them on a rolling basis at the point the number of applications exceed the amount of money in the fund. I'm just pointing out the discussion.
I agree with what you just said. I think it's a good starting point. The only question I would have for council is, I mean, I'd rather get some public information out to residents now and everybody to say, hey, we're opening it up for an innovation fund. But then the next question is, how long is that window? we just keep it open until we get them? Is there a window that we're going to stop taking
We
them?
can do like a.
Or is there a window?
a
I'm
not
just
to-
asking.
We can do like a not to exceed, right? I mean, if we say, we put it out and we say we're going to.
Some people are going to take some time to
First
develop
reviews
something.
in 30 days, right? And we get 1, we're not going to necessarily wait till we get 10 if it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If someone has a $500,000 idea day 1 and, you might see that sooner rather than later because we don't want to not have you start looking at innovative ideas because we're waiting for an artificial number. It's either applications exceed the amount of dollars in the fund or 30 days, 45 days, whichever comes first, something like that. So you at some point would see applications.
I think we should do it right away, but it's a,
Thanks, Mayor. I think I have a simple question. I was just echoing what Andrew said. My understanding is that it's $500,000 and it's one time. I know you said it's non-recurring funds. Are we to assume that whatever doesn't get spent in this year will budget in the next year? Like if you spend 300,000 of it this year, you'll have 200 left next
right,
year?
to continue it on.
Okay.
But it's not really, I mean, we're not going to add it.
It's 500,000 one time.
Correct.
It's not 500,000. It's not like a fund that we replenish each year, so
Correct.
there's always
Might,
500,000.
no,
But we don't know
we
that.
don't know.
Wasn't the direction we got.
haven't
I
decided.
just needed to tell you that the
I'm not in a
the
position to-
forecast does not
Right.
assume any year beyond the current year, that money is not built in the forecast. So if it's going to be your preference to continue 500,000 every year, then you need to tell us because it's not the forecast.
That's not, I don't think we're in a position to make that.
Okay. So whenever
decision. But I guess I'd ask the council, I mean, right now we have $500,000 one-time funds. So either we could do it now to the end of our fiscal year, open it up and see what you get from innovative ideas, or, if they don't meet the criteria, we may not have that many as we think we may have.
Deal with
And
it
then you could carry that, if the pleasure of the council, when the time comes, we carry that to the next year, but not to exceed the maximum, what we already initially started with. And then we'll have that discussion.
I just wanted to comment on one of the things that the city manager said. I do think this should be a rolling process. I wouldn't want them to say, well, once 6 months comes around, or once we get to more than $500,000 worth of submissions, then we'll bring them all so they can all sort of be discussed simultaneously. I'd much rather, every 60 days, if something comes, like whatever is in is, okay, as long as that's clear.
I think that's fair. I was just saying, if we got a flurry from the start and we got a
Sure,
bunch,
then there
we
would
wouldn't
have to be
necessarily
some
wait
decisions
60
made.
days.
We
If
wouldn't
we're
wait
able to-
60 days.
If we're able to vet them and bring them to you, you might be hit by so much innovation, you want to fund $500,000 right out the get-go. I don't know.
So my clarification, Mayor, is one time to us meant you fund it one time. If it doesn't get spent this year, it goes away. What you're saying is it's 500,000 that carries forward any unspent amount.
Correct.
Okay, that's fine. Thank
And
you.
the
But we're
idea
not
that-
adding, I mean, we could, but this one time, we're only talking $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but I mean, I always thought that we would revisit it and look at how successful is this program and see whether we wanted to have it funded for the next year as well. I mean, to say, we're going to innovate, but we're only going to innovate for one calendar year and then the innovation stops.
But it's all
Seems
based
to
on the
be-
funds we have, and we'll have a
understand.
better understanding when we go through our budget process.
Right, but I don't think we're prepared to say right now. that
Mayor?
it's there.
Yes, Joel?
Yeah, no, I think if we look at it, I mean, obviously we have the holidays coming up and we need to advertise it. And you think about if this thing were to have a deadline in January, then there's a process of going through evaluation and then going to the council. It theoretically, it might just be a one-time shot of the 500,000 up against all these applicants that come in and see where it best fits. I wish that we had some more time to say, to evaluate, because I think possibly some of these ideas that come in might need like a year of vetting to show that it does have value, which I'm not opposed to, like
We gotta
taking
start.
next year off.
Right.
I'm not budgeting for next year, but actually having the ability to evaluate what we approve to say, yep, you guys get money, you can get money for these projects, and then actually seeing how those projects actually served our city. Because if there's value to it, then I think 2 years from now we could say, hey, we have money allocated back in for the Innovative Fund. So maybe this is considered as a pilot.
Okay, I think we're in agreement with how Andrew summed it up. We're going to start as soon as we can to get information out on the Innovation Fund. We already have the criteria listed in our memo. That's the basis we're starting off with. And then we're going to start looking at and reviewing the submissions. Andrew's going to appoint 3 members at his discretion. for the Innovation Council, and then they'll make recommendations to the City Council.
I want to clarify that point, Mayor. Are you asking me to actually rank order them? My suggestion was that we vet them for the purpose of seeing.
You vet them, but I also think I think you'd rank them. I mean, that's one of but it's ultimately up to us. So, I mean, that's a process. It's no different than how we do the TCC. Ultimately, we have the final say, and I think and I think that's great. Or you think we should just have it all come and we have a
Mayor, I agree with
full
vetting.
discussion?
I agree with vetting, but rating.
Vetting?
Yeah. Just any kind of vetting, but the rating, I don't necessarily agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, instead of rating, you could recommend, just like we have board and commissions to be consistent. A recommendation, and you could recommend all these go forward. You could recommend some of them.
Mayor, I would see it just a little bit differently in the sense that when we do contract renewals, there's 2 boxes on a little Excel sheet down at the bottom that says met metrics, did not meet metrics. And that way, assuming that you met the metrics for your contract, we know, okay, we would, we'd look at that. I would see something like that in the sense of.
Well, if you met the criteria.
Yeah, they vet it to make sure that it meets our strategic goals, which I entirely agree with. They vet it to make sure that it meets the things outlined in the outline as we've modified it here today. But then beyond that.
What exceeds? What about?
Yeah,
meet,
exceeds. I think those would be
Exceed,
two criteria.
it's gonna show through.
Yeah, but I think the reason and the benefit of why I think the TCC stuff doesn't ever get changed is because there would be a huge political capital in line jumping somebody or changing something because there's so much deference given to that, as there should be in that case. I think in this case, it's much more vetting and much less ranking.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Whatever the pleasure of council is it to vet, not rank, or?
I mean, vetting's fine. I still think recommendation would be good. It'd be helpful. It doesn't mean that we get recommendations all the time from our boards and commissions, but we may not agree with some of those recommendations. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to us. So I think to have the vetting process and
Let me give you an example of where we might meet on that to just give clarity to staff. For instance, if we're looking as staff to see, do they even align with a council priority? If they make an assertion that they do that doesn't seem to be valid, we might observe that and make some notations to say, here is an area where it seems like this application makes an assertion, but it's more about if you're comfortable with staff making some annotations and observations without ranking, something like that, we could do that. Because I'm just looking at the memo and saying, if these criteria provides a loose framework, if they look like they're stretching the credulity of the loose framework, with respect to the idea of being somewhat flexible and not overly, doctrinaire about these things, at least to maybe point out some observations of what we see in as things that might be worthy of further council exploration and discussion. Because I presume part of this process might involve the applicant being present to answer questions about their application as well, right? I mean, if you're going to truly score and to make a decision, they might want to be present to talk about whatever it is that they want to have funded. And these are things that might guide your questioning. I don't know.
I don't want to belabor this too much more. One of the other things I think that you should also look at that as part of that vetting process is a basic level of sort of sniff test, right? If somebody comes and says, as part of the innovation project, I'm going to build another pedestrian walkway across Town Lake, all I need is $50,000, I would assume that you all would ask some probing questions to that person and say, well, explain the technology, show me where else it's used, so that there's some level of sort of,
zip line.
Yeah, whatever, right? Right, and you might not weigh in on that.
The example I used with staff is zip line. I mean, how would you look at that?
Right.
Right.
But yeah.
I know, it's going to be interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we have enough, I think. Appreciate it.
All right. State legislative principles. Marge.
Mayor, council members, I'm Marge Zilla, Government Relations Officer for the city. In item 2B, you'll find for your review Tempe's state legislative principles for 2018. These principles will be the basis for Tempe's positions during the upcoming legislative session, and that session begins on January 8th. The principles are arranged in general categories, and they include the overarching policies of preserving local decision-making and local resources. Those are followed by bullets that address more specific topics, and those include supporting municipal economic development resources, reinstating highway user revenue fund levels, integrating municipal perspectives into water management decisions, and considering support for issues that would benefit our partners, which would include other municipalities and other entities. I'd like to point out that, as it states in the memo, staff will be continually seeking direction from council throughout the session and updating council on the progress of legislation that could impact Tempe. After the first attachment, the legislative principles attachment, you'll find the League of Arizona Cities and Towns municipal policy statement. That's for your reference, and council will be updated on any of those issues as they advance through the legislative process. And I'm available for any questions.
Marta, thank you so much for what you do and the hours you put in during the sessions. It's not an easy job sometimes. You do a great job working with our legislators as well as the council and especially with the other cities, and especially helping us with the league and helping us make sure that we get as much support for local decision making as possible. So thank you. Anybody else have any suggestions or comments? Yes.
We had a workshop that was before the State of the Neighborhoods speech that you gave, Mr. Mayor. I think it was in 2016. And there was a workshop that Tony Canny led, I believe, and you. But it was about the legislature, and it was really valuable in informing citizens how to get involved, how to sign up for to speak, and all of that. Is it possible we could do that before the session begins, or as the session's beginning, to encourage our citizens to get involved in the legislative process and make comments?
Sure, Mayor, Councilmember QB. So we have our Neighborhood Day at the State Capitol scheduled for January 17th.
Right, but that's...
and so that'll be in the water bill inserts, and it'll go out through the neighborhood.
And I love that event, but it's usually the same people that come every year, people that are very involved. But there's a lot of interest these days in getting more involved in decision-making and lending your voice to the process. And it's not that easy to know how to speak before a committee or how to send in a comment. And it seems like we should, maybe it's something we put on the website and just a sort of information guide, like how to sign up for a request to speak. And because you have to go down there and physically register your address, right? It's not as simple as just sending a comment in. And maybe it's not something we do in person, but maybe it's a web page. But I think it would be helpful. And going down to the Capitol, again, it's the middle of the day. Not a lot of people can do that. Some people do their commenting on policies like late at night. So if there's just something that we could do to encourage more civic participation or build capacity that way, I think it'd be great. Do we have any?
Sounds good. I think it's fine.
And we can also highlight that in the emails that go out to our residents.
And
They get regular emails throughout the session with bills of note.
And we have, and maybe we need to take a little more proactive. Maybe we have a one page that we send, like we did, remember when we did it through the budget process, and we sent it to all the neighborhood chairs. So if we work through Shauna Warner's office and the neighborhood associations and our neighborhoods, get that information out, upcoming legislative session, here's our priorities as a council. And we give some information, please, get your voice heard. Here's some information, how to sign up and get involved. List all the contacts for the legislative, the representatives from state senators to representatives during the session. I think that would be helpful as well. Prior to the legislative session, if we could work to get a document out to the neighborhood chairs, and they could use that to send out to the neighborhoods via social media. That would work. Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any future agenda items? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back for the cow. We're going to go ahead and reconvene for the committee of the whole.
During the recession?
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us under items under committee of the whole? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, close that portion of it. Item number 4A1, animal welfare laws and programs. I think Ms. Gwynn's coming forward. Is this your first presentation?
Nope.
This is my last, right. Mayor and Council, Kristen Gwynn, Council Aide. In August of last year, the council approved the formation of the Animal Welfare Working Group to explore 3 separate issues, including tethering of dogs, a pilot program for high-tech pet tags, and low-cost spay and neuter services. So the working group is returning to you tonight with a recommendation on the first of those initiatives, the anti-tethering ordinance. The working group researched the issue, including review of data indicating that dogs who are regularly tied out or tethered often become tangled, leading to injury or lack of access to water or shelter. Additionally, studies have shown that tethered dogs are 3 times as likely to become aggressive and bite humans, as well as more likely to have increased incidence of nuisance barking and other stress behaviors. The group worked with national and statewide stakeholders, including the Humane Society of the United States, Poverty Pets, and the Arizona Animal Welfare League. They also had significant input from Bill Amato, our law enforcement liaison, and Detective Richard Fairclough, who handles our animal abuse and neglect cases. The working group then reviewed a variety of ordinances from jurisdictions within Arizona and across the country, identifying key variables that they wanted to address. And we'll go over those in just a second. The Animal Welfare Group began with the belief that most people who regularly tether their dogs don't do so because they dislike their dogs, but likely aren't aware of a better alternative when dealing with unfenced yards or fence-jumping pups. So it was important to the group that this ordinance be a path to education. So in addition to the ordinance before you, the group has been in conversation with our prosecutor's office to discuss the development of a diversion program that would allow for local training and access to community resources that would provide safer and more humane alternatives for those who need them, should this ordinance move forward tonight and ultimately pass. The ordinance itself sets guidelines for varying levels of supervision, prohibiting tethering completely with no one at home, but allowing for indirect supervision defined as an owner or custodian on the property, but not necessarily with the dog directly. Under this indirect supervision, dogs may be tethered only under the following circumstances. The tether must be attached to a sliding cable or trolley system or a stake with a swivel mechanism, prohibiting tethering to stationary objects, which is less safe. The tether must be in good repair and able to hold the dog. The collar must fit properly, and choke collars, pinch collars, and prong collars are prohibited for this purpose. The dog must have regular access to food, water, shade, and shelter while tethered. And tethering is prohibited in extreme weather conditions, which the group defined as temperatures below 45 degrees or above 85 degrees, or the presence of a monsoon, thunderstorm, or similar storm systems, or a storm warning from a weather authority. The temperature range was selected because it is the federal standard under the USDA for outdoor housing of dogs. We also had public feedback from multiple sources. First, having a preliminary conversation in an animal welfare community forum last year, and the attendees were overwhelmingly in favor of the idea. And then we put this final draft of the ordinance on the Tempe forum site and solicited feedback from our residents. Got quite a bit of feedback, which was approximately 85% in favor of the ordinance. Those who were against it, their most common question was, is this really necessary? And what we found as we started to put this out to the public was that we started to get phone calls from people thanking us for looking at this issue because they have neighbors who are tying up their dogs all day long and things like that. So we are definitely seeing that there is a need. We also had feedback from PD that sometimes they get these kinds of calls and complaints, and it doesn't rise to the level of our existing animal abuse or neglect statutes, and so this is just another tool in the toolbox to help keep animals and residents safe. Enforcement of the ordinance would be complaint-driven, and violations of the ordinance would be a Class 3 misdemeanor, which is consistent with our other existing animal welfare laws. And I would happily take any questions.
Great. Councilmember Cubey. Councilmember Keating.
Well, I just want to thank Kristen Gwynn for the enormous amount of work you put into this, and we thought it was going to be a simple one. But in reaching out to so many different pet advocacy organizations and having the animal protection town hall that we had was a really great addition. And we see this as just the beginning. We're looking at a variety of pet-related initiatives in the coming months. We'll be bringing back to council, and we think this is the one of a first step in a larger citywide initiative to focus on education and providing resources as well, because we don't see this, as if there is a case where someone has a problem, we don't intend to jail them. We intend to offer diversion. They could get a class and be taught how to to properly tether the dog or when, and just training for a dog that barks a lot or escapes a lot, because there are treatments, that sounds a little suspicious, but there's ways that you can train a dog not to leap and try and jump over fences. So, I mean, we could go into some of the details if you guys want to hear more about why tethering is dangerous and how it promotes territoriality and barking and nuisance barking. And I hope we've made that case to you today. We hope we'll have your support.
I think we're good. Is everybody good?
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Sounds good. Good job. Thank you.
I'm here, Mark.
You good, Joel?
No, I'm good. I'm just telling you I'm here.
All right. Next item is citywide internet as a utility. This is coming from Councilmember Granville and Councilmember Shapiro.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll start off, and I'm sure Councilmember Shapiro will let me know if I've missed anything or rephrased anything, as he is wont to do. So this really came about from just the fact that, there was a time period where we were talking about Google Fiber coming to Tempe. We were on the list was going along, and then Google made the business decision, completely unrelated to Tempe, that they just weren't going to be rolling this out again in another phase. And so Tempe and other parts of the United States just sort of went to the wayside with that, which is understandable. They're a business. They make business decisions. At that point, I wanted to bring this forward to try and figure out ways to increase competition. Councilmember Shapiro asked me to wait just a little while. I respect that, so we waited until he got done with his other committee, and then he and I brought this forward. The initial thought of it was not an end-driven result. It was really, wasn't we didn't want a thing, but we wanted a result. The result being greater speeds, greater customer service, greater competition, lower prices. How we got there was not really, the thing. And so initially we sort of looked into the idea of the city getting into the internet business. When we looked at some of the other communities that do it, many of them do it marginally. It's tough to do it efficiently. It's tough to do it cost effectively. There are high startup capital costs. And so we thought, you know what, this probably isn't the way to go. But that doesn't alleviate all of the things we're trying to accomplish, right? More competition, lower prices, better customer service, faster speeds. And so the conclusion that we came to was that we really need to look at ways to remove barriers of entry, because high-speed internet, for good or bad, is perceived by some as a utility and lends itself to being a natural monopoly, meaning that through no fault of anyone's, there tends to only be one or two providers, just barriers of entry. And so what we focused on was, how do we remove those barriers of entry? And the thing that we came across actually ties in very good to what we voted on just a little while ago, and that is we had an innovative IT department manager who said, look, when we're tearing up the streets, why don't we put in fiber? Because we're tearing them up anyway, and the fiber is relatively cheap to put in. It's practically cost-free after you put it in. There's very little service of it. It doesn't go bad. It's got a very long life frame. And so 5+ years ago, every time we tear up a street to put in a new water pipe, we're putting down fiber anyway. Just a few weeks ago, council voted on, I want to say it was $1.4 or $2 million to run fiber on Rural Road from our north border to our south border as part of our lighting timing and lighting feedback, so that we could do that. And again, if you're digging up the street anyway, you can put one strand of fiber in just as cheap as you can put in, 1,000, because it's just glass. There's nothing expensive about it. It's the digging is the hard part. And so what we thought is let's try and remove these barriers of entry and allow people to tap into our unused bandwidth capacity. So somebody could go to us conceivably at Rural and Broadway and say, look, I'm not going to build out the whole city, but let me tap into your fiber. Let me provide internet to Hughes Acres or Broadmoor or whatever, and we'll just bill them for using our excess fiber capacity. And of course, that revenue can be used to continue to build out future excess fiber capacity in other areas. Now, if this all sounds like something that the city doesn't have a great deal of expertise in, The answer is probably yes. Certainly, I would say for myself, it's not an area I have a great deal of expertise in. I don't know, is wireless technology going to make this, like cell phone technology, going to make all fiber obsolete? Is this something other cities or nations have tried that have failed? Is this, et cetera, et cetera? How would we even bill someone? Could we bill by the gigabyte? What are the issues in conflict with federal guidelines? Would the federal government prevent us from doing this, et cetera? You can see where it gets a bit beyond the scope of a Cal working group from a knowledge standpoint. So the conclusion that David and I came to was to take this general idea of allowing people to lease our bandwidth, but hiring a consultant to try and put together a framework and say, look, this is a good idea. Singapore does this and it works fine for them. Whoever does this, it works fine for them. Whoever tried this, it doesn't work fine for them. Here's how they did their pricing model, whatever. And maybe, look at Rural Road and the areas along it and immediately adjacent to it as a place that down the road we would, do RFPs and start talking to people about doing pilot programs of rolling out competitive internet in those areas so that, Cox is great, but they're the, Delta or whatever a high tier internet service provider is. And the way you get a cheaper flight to LA is to have 9 airlines competing for your business, not to have 1 airline competing for your business, telling you, trust us, we're the best low-cost customer service leader.
David?
Mayor, just a few things to add. We learned a little bit more about the technology as we were having some of these conversations. And one of the things we talked a lot about was sort of the 5th generation of wireless internet. Because the internet is, going forward, as we know now, I mean, the ability to get what we used to call broadband speeds now on mobile devices is pretty incredible with 4G, but the 5th generation is going to really change the way that we look at internet, because what we now consider broadband is going to be available wirelessly very soon, and fiber is really the path to that. One of the things that we learned about was that a lot of the mobile internet technologies that are going to be coming down the pike are very much more enhanced bandwidth, but perhaps shorter range. And so one of the things that we heard about in the work group is that you might be able to put like a hub at an intersection, and that hub serves, like a quarter mile or half a mile range at a much higher speed. And so one of the things we talked about a lot in that work group as well was the last mile. And you read that in the memo. We get fiber down rural, we get it down, our major arterials. How does that last mile from the major arterial to the customer happen? And with the changes in wireless technology, that may become simpler and simpler as time goes on. And so what Colby talked about in terms of the competitive component is really the best reason to do this in terms of having an infrastructure in our city that breeds more competition with our internet accessibility, but also with the changes in technology, having that fiber, that highest speed possible connection throughout our city is going to be really beneficial. And the last thing is the impact that this has on economic development and business. If you look at some of the cities where Google has already been deploying, or where other internet providers have really expanded fiber opportunities, you attract a whole different kind of business in that area, because you have businesses that really need that level of internet bandwidth, and they're only going to locate in places where they can get it. And so it's a great opportunity for our residents, but it's also a great economic development tool to attract a whole different kind of technology business to our city that is going to be looking for the kind of thing that we'll now be able to offer. One of the things we talk about a lot, and Mayor, I know you tout this, is our appeal to the financial sector. And one of the things that the financial sector really looks for is internet speed. And one of the reasons that they do that is those that do trading on the stock market, they want to be able to hit a button to buy or to sell, and they want that trade to go through faster than their competitor down the street, especially since a lot of this is done through computer modeling now. For example, there are investment companies that have moved from Chicago, closer to New York, because just that little bit of added distance has increased the amount of time it takes for a buy order to go through. That kind of thing would be a huge benefit in the financial sector, to be able to have increased bandwidth and increased speed in our city. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to do this, and the cost is pretty minimal, but I think we need someone who's really an expert on this to help us navigate the process.
Anybody else? Yes, Lauren.
So you know about the San Francisco study that recently came out, and I know you printed out 200 pages and wasted paper. That doesn't impress me.
Wow.
So to pay a consultant to do a very similar study, I mean, I just think it's a waste of taxpayer money. I think we're eliciting this false promise for people. And in the California study, they concluded the low-end cost of that kind of public-private partnership was $1.48 billion. If you extrapolate and look at Tempe with 95,808 serviceable homes, 2,000 per household, it's over $196 million. Some of the results of that study are pertinent to what you're asking a consultant to do, and I don't understand why we'd want to spend that money, so I'm confused about that. Also, Cox has 659 miles of fiber network through the city. Our fiber is 25 miles. It's extensively used, and we have 65 miles of conduit that could be used. And Google looked at the situation and they decided they didn't want to do it because they looked at fiber perhaps, and that delivery system is kind of like the VHS tapes of internet providing service. And so what makes it, how is it going to be different? If Google can't make the numbers work, how do we make that work?
Mayor, and Lauren, you and I had this conversation. I mean, it wasn't that Google couldn't make numbers work. I mean, the folks I've talked to from Google didn't say it didn't pencil in Tempe, and that's why we're not doing it.
No, it wasn't just the numbers. It's just like they think of
it wasn't the numbers at all.
Technology is going to be different, and they'd rather wait until the technology.
Yeah, where are you getting that from?
From staff and from Google's conversations with Google. What did you hear?
Yeah, I mean, when I talked to folks at Google, that was not at all what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
They said that they're still planning on rolling out fiber in cities across the country. They actually have cities where they're implementing right now, and Tempe is still on a list of cities that they would like to do, but that it's not. They've pushed back their timeline on their next tier of cities.
It's also because they want to take their investments and invest it in the newer technologies that are coming up. That's what was my understanding too.
That was in an AZ. It was in an article. I mean, it was in AZ Central exactly what Lauren just mentioned about the reason why they doing the last mile connecting to the house was cost prohibitive because they wouldn't make up that investment over the time that they had because of the new technology that could be coming down. I agree with Lauren. I think hiring a consultant for $50,000 to tell us something that we already know that it's going to be so expensive. I just don't think it's the staff's time or knowing that how much it's going to cost, as Lauren mentioned. I just don't think it's something that we should be going down that path with our staff just to get the same result. I mean, just look at the study from San Francisco. You have it.
I haven't read it yet. I just got it. I literally just got it shown to me for the first time yesterday.
Could we hear from Dave? Could Dave come and speak to us?
Yeah, you mentioned our city staff. My understanding is our fiber is pretty much almost all used up of what we have.
I mean, our fibers, yeah.
So and I know I would be surprised if Cox or anyone else would allow anyone else to connect with their fiber.
Right, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Well, yeah, but Dave, I mean, if you guys, I think you guys worked with our staff, but I don't know how this is viable. I mean, something would be great, nice to have, and I agree with the monopoly side, but I don't know if this is realistic.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Is this a good
That's a tough spot to put me in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I definitely would agree that if we do move forward in any direction, that we should probably rely upon some outside consulting to help us. Saying that, I don't believe that fiber is necessarily something that the city would want to get into the business of providing bandwidth on fiber, because that means we have to maintain the fiber ourselves, put the electronics in. So really what you would be looking at is either dark fiber or just leasing conduit. And the dark fiber is probably not that viable either, because these companies are very competitive, and when you have dark fiber, they're bundled in something about the size of a pencil, and they don't like other companies getting into their bundle. So that's really not very viable either. But if you could lease somebody a conduit or microduct within a conduit,
It's called a honeycomb, isn't it?
Yeah, that's sort of what we are planning to do down Rural Road, is we're gonna install these 4 honeycomb fiber, or conduits, and even within them, we would install even microducts, so that you could have one microduct for a particular provider, then they would pull it out into their own vault, because they don't share vaults either. But I guess the reality of that is it's fairly expensive to do that, but it's viable for connecting wireless 5G type antennas, which you are going to, the council member mentioned, you are going to need a density of those devices that is probably about around the range of every 600 feet in order to provide a gigabit indoors wireless. So that is something that they would use fiber to connect all that for the backhaul. But the possibility of them going fiber to the home is very expensive, and that's where the cost.
Right.
And even that, the future is mobility, and mobility requires wireless. And so a customer, even if they had fiber to their home, they're still going to need a mobile plan. And so you're doubling really the cost there. So why wouldn't somebody just have a mobile plan for their home as well? Add a wireless router and put their data plan on it. So, those are really kind of the facts.
Well, is it realistic that a company would come in and want to use our conduit? Would that be a problem? Because wouldn't they have to share it with other companies? Share our
Well, like
conduit?
as I mentioned, we can partition the conduit into microducts, and
put it in.
we've actually done that for Cox has come in and asked us, and so has Level 3, which, by the way, this week is being acquired by CenturyLink, so there's one less competitor. They've come in and we have done deals with them. We provided them a conduit lease to the Gateway building here on Mill, where Limelight is. And we've also provided Cox with fiber on Myrtle and on 5th Street here in a lease agreement. So something that we currently do.
All right, Randy, looks like you're going to be the tiebreaker.
Well, I've been saving up all of my intellectual prowess for this debate. So
I think Joel's up there, sorry.
Joel's here? Well, then never mind. Then I'll just wait for
All
Joel.
right.
I'm just kidding. All right, I'll go.
I'll wait for Randy.
Okay, thanks, Joel. We talk a lot, and we have talked a lot in our renewable energy working group about sending a market signal. I have Cox at home, and in my own experience, my bill keeps going up and the service keeps going down. And I don't have a problem with putting out for an RFP for Colby and David's working group. If for no other reason that it might end up lighting a fire under Cox and getting them to kind of roll out their services in Tempe at a more punctuated rate. So I'm
$50,000.
What are we going to find out? What are we going to know that we don't already know?
I don't know.
Maybe
I haven't read the San Francisco study. I didn't get it, but I don't have a problem with looking into it.
Joel?
Yeah, Mayor, thanks. Yeah, the thing that would be intriguing is reading the San Francisco study. I think I would wait until we could look at that, because I do have concern of just spending money that if we already know the answer, or if we already know that it's going to be a cost that we can't even go down or travel. The other question is, are other utility companies like SRP already doing the fiber already installed in their poles, so that when a company does come in, that those options are already there on SRP poles? So then again, you're kind of doing redundant service, I guess, if they're already providing that service for potential customers or potential companies that want to come in and potentially do internet. Those are questions that are out there that I think that I would like to answer, and then probably read the study before I commit money towards the program. I think I don't disagree. The frustration is crazy. I personally experienced it myself, and just to, like Randy's point, the service goes down and the price goes up. It is very frustrating, but I just want to be smart on how we pursue, for sure, and maybe
I'll
look
tell
at
you,
some options.
thank you. I think we're all frustrated with some of the service, as I think we all have stated. But just to spend $50,000 to get the same response that we're going to get before, I think that is a waste of taxpayer money. I think just to find out, just so that you could, I just think it's a waste of money. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One is just the comments that Councilmember Cubey mentioned, and not to mention if you just Google, and you look at what happened with the rollout nationwide and why they thought it was expensive to connect, and they're not going to see it back. That's the same thing that's happening here. And our own city staff basically said the fiber that we own is currently all used up, from what I understand.
What you just said.
I thought our fiber, that most of the stuff we
25
have.
miles of fiber?
We have fiber primarily in the downtown campus, and then some that we're going to be installing on Rural Road. The most of the stuff that's in the downtown campus is being utilized for city services today.
Right.
Is not available for
Not
leasing.
available for what we have.
The plan on Rural Road is actually only to install fiber for the signal lights, and the others would remain empty conduit, because typically a company that wants to put in an infrastructure, they want to put in their own fiber to meet their specifications and their own equipment and pull their own fiber.
Okay. And then, to my understanding, though, that they're still going to have to put their own fiber in to begin with. So even if we give them the conduit to it, they still have to lay it.
Right. The
Which is another
point of putting the conduit in is to save having to tear up the streets, and also to make it a little bit cheaper for them to come in, because they can amortize the cost of the trench, over a lease.
Right. And my understanding also is that nothing's preventing anybody, another company, from coming in now and doing that very same issue.
Why aren't they?
Putting in the conduit.
Yeah. No one's preventing another company from coming in and doing that.
That was really the level 3 model when they came in, was to install conduit.
And they just got bought out or getting acquired.
So now, and same with Zayo, and they came in and installed a lot of conduit. So they are the ones that are in the power seat right now.
Okay.
That's the point. The fact that CenturyLink bought up what level 3 has laid, they're trying to eliminate competition. I mean, to Randy's point exactly, they're trying to maintain their monopoly, which is why they bought level 3. I'm sure level 3 made a whole lot of money off of that sale. What we could do is actually offer a broader set of options to the market. And the question of why are they not already going out and doing it, the answer is it's extremely expensive to apply to the city to say, hey, we want to tear up all of rural and we want to lay brand new conduit. But if we've got conduit there, or we have dark fiber there, if we have dark fiber that's already in the ground, then the infrastructure already exists. I don't know what San Francisco was looking to do. I don't know exactly what it was that they were trying to do, but the dollar amounts that you were putting out there, Lauren, I can't imagine, for what Colby and I are describing right now, I can't imagine those costs. That just doesn't make any sense. We're already going to have conduit. All we're talking about is put some fiber in the conduit that we already have.
Let's be clear. The conduit we have is just going down Rural Road. It's not going out citywide.
No, we have conduit down Rural Road, and we have some down University, and then we've also got some that loops down to the ASU Research Center.
And how much of that is accessible for anybody else?
How much of the conduit is?
Yeah.
Well, the conduit is accessible. There's no fiber in it today.
There's no, so
we're saying put fiber in it.
Or at least let a consultant tell us if we should put fiber in it.
Yeah.
But we haven't, okay.
Decide whether.
I just think, that's fine. I just think it's,
Mayor.
I don't think it's a good use of taxpayer money, knowing what the answer is going to be.
Joel mentioned not wanting to duplicate because we already have fiber on the SRP poles. I wasn't aware of that. Is that right, Dave?
SRP does have fiber on some of their poles, but it's primarily used for monitoring their utilities.
Okay.
They do have a telecommunications company, and they were in talks with Google when Google was out here about utilizing their fiber. but it's not significant enough that they wouldn't have to do a lot of trenching in the arterials and in the residential areas.
So the infrastructure to do what we're talking about doesn't exist with the SRP fiber.
If what you're talking about is fiber to the home, no.
I think right now, it's a 3-3 split, if I understand Councilman Navarro. The other point is, so if it's a 3-3 split, I'll look to Judy, I think that it fails or dies and come back. The other thing is, if there is the majority in favor of doing it, the next question is, how are you gonna pay for it? Because based on the new rules, you can't use that of the contingency right now, based on what we discussed at the retreat. So that would be the other question I have. So, but it looks like right now it's a 3-3, if that's correct with everybody, that we don't have a majority to move forward with this initiative. Okay.
Mayor, members of council, that would be correct. If there's not a consensus of the council, it would not go forward.
I just want to be clear, Mayor, because we've had other times where it was a 3-3. I've got a good hunch how Robin would vote on this. But that means in the future, when we have a tie, it dies, it doesn't get pushed to the next meeting, right? Because I've never, in 5 years, I've never had something die on a 3-3 vote. It's always been pushed to the next meeting.
We're not taking a vote, we're just looking for
I know we don't
direction.
vote, but we vote. And so, just to be clear, the next time something is at a tied consensus, we don't push it to the next meeting so somebody else can come back. It dies. I just want to make sure that part as well.
Ask our city attorney.
Because that's never
Ask our-
happened before in our history.
Ask our city attorney. Judy?
I don't know what you're asking her. Are you asking her, has it ever happened before? Or are you asking
What
her
are you asking?
I'm asking, will this rule be equally applied to things in the future as well? Because it has not been equally applied to things in the past.
I would defer to our council on that.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. It is my understanding per the rules of council procedure that unless there is a consensus of the council, and cow
takes a
item would
year to
not
come
go
back, I think.
forward.
Oh, I know, we created that rule when I got on council too. I know that rule all too well.
Will be,
I mean, the situation in my mind is this. Imagine you wanted to fly to New York and there was only one airline that took you there. And they said it wasn't a monopoly.
Wait, this is-
And they said
this
it,
is-
and they said it wasn't.
demagoguing. You are
And they
demagoguing
said
in this
it, they
issue.
said it wasn't a monopoly because you could
There's already,
also walk.
there's already been, there's been 3-3, so.
Yeah. A 3-3 not vote.
It's a 3-3 not vote. No, I mean, there's not consensus to move this forward, put it that way.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm sure we'll see about it. All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is new items for council consideration. We don't have any items for progress and updates as needed. Does anybody have any items and updates as needed? See none? Or Lauren?
was an update on the gas-powered blower. Worked with staff on the gas-powered blower and trying to incentivize that with landscapers that work with the city or commercial landscapers. And the staff felt after doing considerable testing that we're just not, the battery-powered, electric battery-powered gas blowers are just not there yet. So they're going to continue to test and work with them. The good thing is they've established relationships with companies that are producing those and working with them and being the testing agent. But we're just not quite ready to look at that. So we're going to table probably take it off the agenda for, maybe I'll revisit in a year, but remove it for now.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Seeing none? Andrew, do you have any manager announcements? I don't have any. We're adjourned.